They said she was too weak to be a wolf, too soft to survive the gathering, too insignificant to catch a king's eye. They were wrong. When Clara Ashford walked into the throne room of the most feared Lycan King in 3 territories, she had nothing, no power, no status, no formidable wolf to prove her worth. Just a quiet defiance that would shake an empire. This is the story of how an overlooked healer's daughter became the queen who changed everything, and how a king frozen by grief learned to feel again. Stay until the end. You won't believe what happens. Drop a comment with your city. I want to know where you're watching from. The carriage wheels ground to a halt on gravel that crunched like broken bones. Clara pressed her palm against the window, watching plumes of her breath fog the cold glass. Beyond it, the Shadow Palace rose from the mountainside like a scar, black stone towers clawing at a sky the color of old bruises. Torches burned along its battlements, their flames dancing in the bitter wind that swept down from the northern peaks. "Out!" the guard barked, yanking the carriage door open. He was a massive man, his face scarred from battles Clara couldn't imagine, his eyes hard as the iron of his armor. The king doesn't wait for frightened girls. Clara stepped down onto unfamiliar ground, her simple traveling cloak immediately whipped by wind that tasted of snow and smoke. Around her, other carriages disgorged their passengers, daughters of alphas, betas, and nobles from across the 3 territories. They wore fine silks and velvets in deep jewel tones. Their wolves radiated power even in human form, that barely contained energy that marked the strong. Clara's own wolf, small and trembling in the back of her mind, whimpered. "We don't belong here," her wolf whispered. "I know," Clara thought back, "but we're here anyway." "Is that really her?" A voice carried on the wind, sharp with disdain. Clara recognized the speaker. Vivian Ashcroft, daughter of the Silver Ridge Alpha, her auburn hair swept into an elaborate style that must have taken hours. The healer's daughter? Someone actually brought her? Laughter rippled through a cluster of women near the palace steps. Clara kept her eyes forward, her spine straight despite the heat creeping up her neck. She'd heard worse. Been called worse. The healer's pack was small, situated on the border between territories, valuable only for their medicinal skills. Her father had healing hands that could close wounds and ease fevers, but among wolves, healers ranked below warriors, below hunters, below nearly everyone, especially healers with weak wolves. "Look at her cloak," another woman whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. "Is that homespun? To meet the Lycan King?" Clara's fingers tightened on the worn fabric. Her mother had made this cloak, stitching protective herbs into the lining, working by candlelight after long days in the infirmary. It was the finest thing Clara owned, and it was nothing compared to the finery surrounding her. The palace doors groaned open, and a figure emerged that silenced every whisper. He was tall and lean, dressed in black that seemed to absorb light. His face was angular, beautiful in a way that was almost cruel, with high cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from the same stone as his palace. But it was his eyes that stopped Clara's breath. Silver, like moonlight on water, like winter ice, like nothing human or entirely wolf. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the courtyard. It was deep and smooth, with an edge that suggested he could turn from courtesy to violence in a heartbeat. "I am Caspian Shadow, Lycan King of the Northern Territory, Warden of the Western Reaches, and Guardian of the Mountain Passes." His gaze swept over the assembled women with the detachment of someone examining livestock. Clara felt her wolf shrink further inside her, trying to make itself invisible. "You have been summoned because I require a mate," Caspian continued, his tone suggesting he was discussing something as mundane as requisitioning supplies. "A queen to stand beside me, to bind the territories in alliance, to provide heirs and ensure stability. No mention of love, no pretense of romance, just cold political calculation. Each of you will be presented. I will make my choice within the week." His silver eyes glinted. "Do not waste my time." With that, he turned and strode back into the palace, his long coat billowing behind him like smoke. The women erupted into whispers, some excited, some nervous, all calculating. Clara stood silent, her heart pounding against her ribs. What was she doing here? Her pack leader had insisted she attend. "We need the alliance, and you're the only unmated woman of age." But everyone knew it was meaningless. The Lycan King wouldn't choose a nobody like her. She was just here to fill a quota. "Inside, but," the scarred guard shouted. "You'll be shown to your chambers. Presentations begin at sunset." The palace interior was as cold as its exterior, all black marble and iron chandeliers. Servants in gray livery moved silently through corridors lit by torches that cast more shadows than light. Clara was led to a small room in the east wing, the lesser nobles' quarters, the servant said, not unkindly, with a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a window that overlooked the training yards below. Through the glass, she could see warriors sparring, their movements brutal and efficient. The Lycan King's army was legendary, trained to fight both in wolf form and human, deadly in either shape. She watched a massive man drive his opponent into the dirt, heard the distant crack of impact. This is a kingdom built on strength, Clara thought, and I have none. A knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Ashford?" A young servant girl stood in the hallway, her eyes downcast. "I'm to help you prepare for the presentation." "I don't need—" "Everyone must be presented properly," the girl interrupted softly. "King's orders." Clara submitted to being washed, her hair brushed and pinned into something resembling elegance. The servant girl produced a gown, simple compared to what the other women likely wore, but finer than anything Clara had owned. It was deep green, the color of pine forests, with silver embroidery along the sleeves. "It suits you," the servant said, securing the final pin. "You have kind eyes. We don't see that often here." Before Clara could respond, a bell tolled through the palace. The call to assembly. The throne room was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. Torches lined the walls, and at the far end, elevated on a dais of black stone, sat a throne that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of obsidian. Beside it stood Caspian Shadow, his expression unreadable. The women assembled in a line, arranged by rank and status. Clara found herself near the end, between a nervous beta's daughter and a wall. She could see the others ahead of her. Vivian Ashcroft in crimson silk, her wolf practically glowing with power. Elena Graythorne, daughter of the Western Alpha, wearing sapphire blue and dripping in silver jewelry. At least a dozen others, each more impressive than the last. The presentations began. One by one, the women stepped forward. A herald announced their names, their lineage, their pack's accomplishments. The Lycan King acknowledged each with a slight nod, his silver eyes revealing nothing. Some women tried to engage him in conversation, batting eyelashes or making bold declarations of their suitability. He responded with monosyllables, clearly uninterested. "He's like a statue," the beta's daughter whispered beside Clara. "Does he even care?" Clara watched him carefully. There was something in the set of his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed once against the armrest before stilling. He wasn't indifferent. He was contained, like a wolf trap, perfectly still until sprung. The line moved forward. Vivian stepped up, her presentation polished and confident. She spoke of her pack's military contributions, her own skills in strategy and combat. Caspian listened without expression, then dismissed her with a "Thank you, Miss Ashcroft." Vivian's confident smile flickered, but she maintained composure as she stepped aside. Elena Graythorne was next, her wolf powerful enough that Clara could feel it from across the room, a pressure against her skin like static before a storm. Elena's presentation was shorter, more direct. "My pack controls the western trade routes. An alliance would be mutually beneficial." Caspian's lips twitched, almost a smile. "And you would marry for trade routes?" "I would marry for many reasons, Your Majesty. Trade routes would simply be a bonus." He actually chuckled, a sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Noted, Miss Graythorne." But he didn't choose her. The presentations continued. Each woman stepped forward, made her case, and stepped back. Clara's pulse quickened as her turn approached. Her wolf was whimpering continuously now, a soft sound of distress that only she could hear. "What do I even say?" Clara thought desperately. "I have nothing to offer him." Clara Ashford, daughter of Healer Ashford of the Border Pack. The herald's voice boomed through the throne room, and suddenly every eye was on her. Clara felt her legs move, carrying her forward without conscious thought. The distance to the throne seemed impossibly long, her footsteps echoing on marble that felt as unstable as ice. She stopped at the designated spot, forcing herself to look up. Caspian Shadow's silver eyes met hers, and the world tilted. For a heartbeat, Clara forgot to breathe. Up close, he was even more striking and more dangerous. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, the kind of strength that could crush her without effort. His gaze pinned her in place, sharp and assessing, looking for weakness, finding plenty. Clara Ashford, he said, her name sounding strange in his deep voice. A healer's daughter. Yes, Your Majesty. And what does a healer's daughter offer a Lycan King? It was a fair question. It was also a dismissal, the same tone he'd used with several others before politely moving on. Clara could see the path forward. Beau say something humble, step aside, disappear back to her small room and smaller life. But something in his eyes stopped her. A flicker, there and gone, of something that looked almost like loneliness. Honesty, Clara heard herself say. The word hung in the air between them. Caspian's expression didn't change, but his fingers stopped their drumming. Explain. Clara's heart hammered, but she'd started now. No turning back. Every woman here has told you what they can offer. Power, connections, military strength, trade routes. All valuable things for a king. She paused, gathering courage. But you already have power. You already command the strongest army in 3 territories. What you don't have. She faltered, suddenly aware of how presumptuous this sounded. What don't I have? His voice was soft, but it carried an edge. Someone who will tell you the truth, Clara said quietly. Not because they fear you, and not because they want something from you. Just the truth. Silence crashed over the throne room. Clara could hear her own pulse in her ears, feel the weight of every stare burning into her back. She'd overstepped. She'd insulted him. Do you have a mate, Miss Ashford? The question caught her off guard. No, Your Majesty. Never? Never. She swallowed. My wolf is not strong. Most wolves don't. She stopped, unwilling to voice the rejection she'd faced her entire life. Caspian leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. Look at me. Clara looked up, meeting those silver eyes fully. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then something shifted. She felt it. A pull in her chest like a thread drawing tight. Her wolf, timid and small, suddenly lifted its head. What is that? Caspian's expression changed, just fractionally. His eyes widened, his breath catching audibly. He stood abruptly from his throne, descending the steps until he was level with her, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his skin despite the cold palace. Do you feel that? He demanded, his voice rough. Clara's mouth went dry. I don't know what you mean. But she did. That pull, that thread, was growing stronger, wrapping around her ribs, tugging her toward him. Her wolf, suddenly alert and focused in a way it had never been, was recognizing something. No, Caspian said. But he wasn't talking to her. He was backing away, his face closing off. No, not possible. He spun toward his advisor, an elderly man in dark robes who had been standing silently to the side. Continue the presentations. Your Majesty, if this is... Continue the presentations, Caspian snarled, his eyes flashing with wolf light. Then he strode from the room, his coat billowing behind him, leaving stunned silence in his wake. Clara stood frozen, her chest tight, that strange pull now aching like a wound. What had just happened? The advisor cleared his throat. Miss Ashford, you may return to the line. She walked back on shaking legs, aware of the whispers erupting around her. The remaining presentations passed in a blur. Clara heard none of them, too focused on the phantom sensation in her chest, the feeling that something had shifted fundamentally in the space of a conversation. When the presentations finally ended, the women were dismissed to their chambers for dinner. Clara barely made it to her room before her legs gave out. She sank onto the narrow bed, her mind racing. What happened? Her wolf paced restlessly inside her, agitated in a way it had never been. That pull was still there, fainter now with distance, but undeniable. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart racing beneath her palm. A knock at the door made her jump. Miss Ashford? A different servant, older, with sharp eyes. The king requests your presence. Now. Clara's stomach dropped. I don't understand. Now, the servant repeated, her tone brooking no argument. She was led through a different part of the palace, away from the public halls into private corridors, where the torches burned lower and the shadows pressed closer. They stopped before an unmarked door of dark wood. The servant knocked once, then opened it. "Miss Ashford, Your Majesty." Clara stepped through, and the door closed behind her with ominous finality. The room was a study, lined with books and maps, a fire crackling in a stone hearth. And standing before that fire, his back to her, was Caspian Shadow. "Your Majesty, What pack is your mother from?" he interrupted, not turning. The Riverside pack, Your Majesty. But she... And your grandmother?" Clara frowned, confused. "I don't know. My mother never spoke of her. She died young." Caspian finally turned, and the look on his face stopped Clara's words. He looked haunted, his silver eyes burning with something between fury and fear. "Do you know what you are?" he asked quietly. "I'm a healer's daughter, a wolf with... You're a true mate," he cut her off, his voice harsh. "My true mate." The words didn't make sense. True mates were rare, legendary even, a perfect match of souls, a bond that couldn't be broken or denied. They were the stuff of old stories, not reality. "That's not possible," Clara whispered. "I'm nobody. My wolf is weak. I can't..." "I had a true mate once before," Caspian said, his voice flat. 19 years ago. Her name was Lyanna. She was perfect, strong, beautiful, everything a queen should be. His jaw tightened. "She died in childbirth. The baby didn't survive either." Clara's breath caught. "I'm sorry." "I swore I would never bond again," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "I locked that part of myself away, buried it so deep that nothing could reach it." He laughed, a bitter sound. "And then you walked into my throne room, smelling of lavender and courage, and that thing I buried recognized you." He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just before her, so close she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Tell me you don't feel it." Clara couldn't lie. "I feel it. Tell me your wolf isn't calling to mine." Her wolf whined, pressing forward inside her, desperate to be closer to him. "She is." Caspian's hand came up, almost touching her face before he caught himself, fingers curling into a fist. "This is impossible. True mates are once in a lifetime. You can't have 2. "Maybe," Clara's voice shook, "maybe the bond knew, that you'd lose her, that you'd need..." "Don't," he warned, his voice dangerous. "Don't make this into some kind of destiny. I don't believe in that anymore." "Then what do you believe in?" He stared at her, something raw and wounded in his eyes. "I believe in duty, in keeping my people safe, in never ever letting anyone close enough to destroy me again." His voice dropped. "And you, Clara Ashford, with your soft wolf and your honest eyes, could destroy me." The admission hung between them, vulnerable and terrifying. "I don't want to destroy you," Clara said softly. "I don't want to destroy anyone." "I know." He stepped back, his expression closing off. "That's why this is impossible." "Your Majesty." "Caspian," he said roughly. "If we're going to be tied together by fate's cruel joke, you might as well use my name." "Caspian," Clara tried, the name strange on her tongue. "What happens now?" He was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "The bond is there, whether I want it or not. It will only grow stronger. Eventually," he exhaled sharply, "eventually, denying it will cause us both physical pain." Clara had heard of that. True mates who rejected the bond suffered for it, their wolves slowly going mad from the separation. "So we have to..." "I need time," Caspian said. "To think, to adjust." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You'll stay in the palace. Tell no one about this. Not yet. The other women, I'll dismiss them tomorrow. Send them home with generous gifts and diplomatic excuses." His mouth twisted. "Apparently my choice has already been made for me." There was such bitterness in his voice that Claire's chest ached. "I didn't ask for this either." "I know." He moved to the door, opening it. "Marcus will escort you back to your chamber. We'll speak again tomorrow." It was a dismissal. Clara moved toward the door but stopped beside him, driven by impulse she didn't fully understand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About Liana. About your child. About all of it. Caspian's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. She stepped into the hallway where the servant, Marcus, waited, and the door closed softly behind her. The walk back to her chamber passed in a daze. Clara's mind couldn't process what had just happened. True mate. She was the Lycan King's true mate. A man who had already loved and lost, who had locked his heart away, who looked at her with a mixture of wonder and resentment. She barely slept that night, her wolf too restless, that bond in her chest pulling like a tide she couldn't resist. Sometime before dawn, she finally drifted off, only to be awakened by pounding on her door. Miss Ashford, the king requires all the women in the throne room, immediately. Clara dressed quickly, her fingers clumsy with exhaustion and nerves. The hallways were chaos, servants rushing everywhere, the other women emerging from their chambers in various states of confusion and excitement. What's happening? Elena Graythorne asked, falling into step beside Clara. I don't know. But she did. He was going to send them home. End this farce of a selection process because fate had already decided. The throne room was packed when they arrived, all the women assembled, whispers echoing off the high ceiling. Caspian stood before his throne, flanked by advisors, his expression carved from stone. Ladies, he began, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. I thank you for answering my summons. However, circumstances have changed. Vivian Ashcroft stepped forward. Your Majesty, if we've displeased you— You have not, Caspian interrupted, but my decision is made. I have found my queen. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Clara's heart stopped. Each of you will receive compensation for your travel and time. My steward will arrange your departures. His silver eyes scanned the room, not landing on anyone in particular. I wish you safe journeys home. Who? Vivian demanded, her composure cracking. Who did you choose? Caspian's gaze finally settled on Clara, and the weight of every eye in the room followed. The whispers started immediately. Shock, disbelief, barely contained laughter. Her? Someone said, not bothering to whisper. The healer's daughter? This is a joke, Vivian said flatly. Your Majesty, please. She's nobody. Her wolf is practically human. She can't possibly— Enough. The word cracked like a whip. Caspian's eyes flashed wolf silver, his power filling the room until the air felt thick with it. You question my judgment? Vivian paled, taking a step back. No, Your Majesty. Forgive me. All of you are dismissed. Now. The women filed out, some throwing venomous looks at Clara, others just stunned. Elena Graythorne paused beside her, her expression thoughtful. I don't know what you did, she murmured, but it must have been impressive. Good luck. You'll need it. Then she was gone, and Clara was alone in the throne room with Caspian and his advisors. One of them, a stout man with a gray beard, stepped forward. Your Majesty, with respect, the council should be consulted on such an important decision. An alliance with the Graythorne or Ashcroft packs would— I am your king, Caspian said quietly, dangerously. Not your puppet. My choice is made. The advisor bowed stiffly. Of course, Your Majesty. They filed out, leaving Clara and Caspian alone. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant sound of departing carriages in the courtyard. I'm sorry, Clara said finally. I've made problems for you. Caspian turned to look at her, and for just a moment his expression softened. You didn't make the problems. Fate did. He descended from the dais, stopping a careful distance away. But we'll have to deal with them together. I don't understand why the Bond chose me, Clara admitted. I'm not strong. I'm not powerful. I can't help you rule. Maybe that's exactly why, Caspian interrupted. Because I don't need someone powerful. I am powerful. What I need— He trailed off, struggling for words. What I need is something I'm afraid to want. What? He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. Someone who sees me as more than a king, more than a weapon, more than— He stopped, shaking his head. Never mind. It doesn't matter. It matters, Clara said softly. Everything matters. Caspian studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he extended his hand. Walk with me. Clara hesitated only a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and that bond in her chest sang with rightness. Together, they walked from the throne room, stepping into an uncertain future that neither of them had chosen, but both of them would have to face. And somewhere in the cold palace, in the space between duty and desire, between fear and hope, something began to thaw. The palace gardens were nothing like the wild forests surrounding Clara's home territory. Here, everything was controlled. Hedges trimmed into severe geometric shapes, flowers planted in rigid rows, gravel paths raked into perfect patterns. Even nature itself seemed to bow to the Lycan King's will. Caspian led her along the eastern path, their footsteps crunching in unison. His hand still held hers, though his grip was careful, as if she might shatter. The morning sun was weak, filtered through clouds that promised snow. "The council will demand an audience," Caspian said finally, breaking the silence. "Today, most likely. They'll want to understand my choice." "What will you tell them?" "The truth." He glanced at her, his silver eyes unreadable. "That you're my true mate. They'll have no choice but to accept it." Clara's stomach twisted. "They won't like it." "They don't have to like it. They have to obey." His jaw tightened. "That's how kingdoms work." "That's how your kingdom works," Clara corrected gently. "But is it how you want it to work?" He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you rule through fear alone, or if there's something else." She met his gaze steadily. "Because from what I've seen, everyone here is terrified of you. The servants flinch when you pass. Your advisors won't speak freely, even your guards." "My guards respect strength," Caspian interrupted, "as they should." "Respect and terror aren't the same thing." His expression hardened. "In my world, they're close enough." Clara felt her wolf stir, agitated by his tone. "Is that what happened to Liana? Did she fear you too?" The moment the words left her mouth, she knew she'd gone too far. Caspian's eyes flashed with wolf light, power radiating from him in waves that made her knees weak. For a heartbeat, she thought he might shift, might let his wolf tear free and remind her exactly who she was speaking to. But instead, he released her hand and stepped back, his face a mask of ice. "You know nothing about Liana." "You're right," Clara said, refusing to back down despite the fear coursing through her. "I don't. Because you won't tell me. You won't tell anyone. You just lock it all away and pretend you don't feel anything." "Careful, Clara." "Why? What will you do? Send me away?" She laughed, the sound hollow. "We both know you can't. The bond won't let you. So maybe instead of threatening me, you could try actually talking to me." Caspian stared at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Then, without another word, he turned and strode back toward the palace, his coat snapping behind him like a banner. Clara stood alone in the garden, her heart hammering. Her wolf whimpered, distressed by the distance growing between them and their mate. The bond in her chest pulled painfully, demanding she follow, she fix this, she submit. But she didn't move. If this was going to work, if they were going to survive being bound together, she couldn't become another person who feared him. She had to be exactly what she'd promised, someone who would tell him the truth, even when it hurt. She returned to her chamber to find a servant waiting with breakfast and a message. "The council meeting is in 2 hours, Miss Ashford. His Majesty requests your presence." Clara's appetite vanished. "Where?" "The war room, 3rd floor, west wing." The servant hesitated. "If I may, the council can be harsh. Don't take their words personally." "Thank you," Clara managed, though dread was already settling in her stomach like stone. She picked at the food, managing only a few bites of bread before her nerves made eating impossible. Her simple wardrobe offered little choice. She selected the least worn of her dresses, a dove-gray wool that at least fit properly. No jewelry, no ornaments. She looked exactly like what she was, a healer's daughter playing at being a queen. The walk to the West Wing felt like a march to execution. Servants whispered as she passed, their eyes following her with mixtures of curiosity and pity. She heard fragments of conversation. "Can't possibly last. He'll tire of her. What was he thinking?" The war room doors were guarded by 2 massive warriors who barely glanced at her before pushing them open. The room beyond was circular, dominated by a huge table covered in maps and markers. Around it sat 8 men and 2 women, all dressed in the dark colors that seemed to be favored in this court. Their wolves were powerful. Clara could feel the weight of them pressing against her consciousness, testing, judging. At the head of the table sat Caspian, his expression carved from granite. "Miss Ashford," he said formally, "please sit." The only empty chair was beside him. Clara crossed the room on shaking legs, aware of every eye tracking her movement. She sank into the seat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "Now that we're all assembled," Caspian continued, his tone clipped, "I'll address your concerns directly. Yes, I have chosen Clara Ashford as my mate. Yes, I understand she is not from one of the major packs. No, I will not be reconsidering." "Your Majesty," the stout advisor from earlier spoke up, his voice carefully neutral. "No one questions your authority to choose. But surely you can understand our confusion. An alliance with the Ashcroft or Greythorn packs would have strengthened our military position considerably." "We don't need strengthening," Caspian said flatly. "Our military is already the strongest in 3 territories." "For now," a woman with steel-gray hair interjected. Her wolf felt ancient and dangerous, radiating authority that Clara couldn't identify. "But the Eastern packs grow restless. There are rumors of alliance talks, discussions of challenging your borders." "Let them try," Caspian interrupted, his voice cold. "They'll find out what happens when they test me." "With respect, Your Majesty," another counselor said, a lean man with a scar across his throat. "Wars are won not just with strength, but with strategic alliances. Miss Ashford's pack offers neither military support nor significant resources. What exactly does this union provide?" All eyes turned to Clara. She felt her face flush, her wolf curling in on itself in shame. The question was brutal in its directness, and she had no good answer. "She's my true mate," Caspian said, his tone brooking no argument. "That should be sufficient explanation." Shocked silence crashed over the room. Clara's head snapped up, staring at Caspian. He hadn't mentioned revealing the bond to the council. She'd thought they would keep it secret, at least for now. "True mate?" the gray-haired woman breathed. "Your Majesty, you already had—" "I'm aware of what I had, Magistrate Thorn." Caspian's voice could have frozen fire. "I'm also aware that true mates are recognized by the soul, not chosen by logic or politics. The bond exists whether it's convenient or not." The counselors exchanged glances, some skeptical, others calculating. The stout advisor, Clara thought his name was Cornelius, cleared his throat. "If this is true, then of course we accept your choice, Your Majesty. A true mate bond is sacred, undeniable, but—" He looked at Clara, his expression almost pitying. "Forgive me, Miss Ashford, but your wolf is considerably weaker than His Majesty's. Such an imbalance in a true mate pairing is unusual." "It's unprecedented," Magistrate Thorn corrected sharply. "True mates are typically matched in power, equals who complement each other." Her eyes raked over Clara dismissively. "This girl is no equal to a Lycan King." Clara felt the words like physical blows. Her wolf whimpered, and she had to fight the urge to flee from the room, from the palace, from all of this. "Enough," Caspian said quietly, but there was steel beneath the word. "You will show Clara the respect due to your future queen, or you will find yourselves replaced by those who will." Magistrate Thorn's lips pressed into a thin line, but she inclined her head. "Of course, Your Majesty." "Now," Caspian continued, his fingers drumming once against the table, "unless there are matters of actual importance to discuss, this meeting is adjourned." "There is one more thing," the scarred counselor said. "The rogue attacks on our eastern border have increased. 3 incidents in the past month alone." Caspian's attention sharpened. "Casualties?" 2 farmers dead, 1 seriously injured. The rogues are getting bolder, attacking closer to settled areas. Double the patrols. "I want hunting parties sent out. Find their den and eliminate them." Caspian's voice held no mercy. "Rogues who attack my people forfeit their lives." "It will be done," the counselor said, bowing his head. The meeting dissolved, counselors filing out with murmured farewells and curious glances at Clara. Magistrate Thorn paused beside Clara's chair, her expression unreadable. "A word of advice, girl," she said quietly. "Being a true mate doesn't make you a queen. That takes strength, wisdom, and the respect of those you'll rule. Right now, you have none of those things." She leaned closer. "Don't mistake the bond for competence. His Majesty may be forced to keep you, but that doesn't mean you won't be a liability." Then she swept from the room, leaving Clara feeling like she'd been carved hollow. Caspian waited until they were alone before speaking. "Don't listen to her." "She's right, though," Clara said quietly. "I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know politics or strategy or anything useful." "You know how to heal," Caspian countered. "You know how to see people as more than tools or threats. That's rarer than you think." Clara looked up at him, searching his face for signs of mockery or pity. She found neither, just a weary honesty that made her chest ache. "You defended me in there." "Of course I did. You're mine to defend now." He stood, moving toward the window that overlooked the training yards. "Whether I want to be or not, the bond makes you my responsibility." "Is that all I am? A responsibility?" Caspian was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know what you are yet," he finally admitted. "My wolf recognizes you as mate. My mind knows the bond is real, but my heart—" He pressed a hand to his chest. "My heart is still buried with Liana." The confession was so raw that Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not trying to replace her." "I know." He turned to face her, his silver eyes shadowed with old pain. "That's what makes this harder. If you were trying to replace her, I could resent you, hate you even, but you're not. You're just here, being honest and brave in everything I can't afford to care about." "Why can't you afford it?" "Because caring makes you weak," Caspian said simply. "It makes you vulnerable. And in my position, vulnerability gets people killed." Clara stood, crossing the room to stand before him. This close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He looked older than his years, worn down by the weight of his crown. "Being closed off doesn't make you strong," she said gently. "It just makes you alone." Caspian's jaw tightened. "Alone keeps me alive." "Does it? Or does it just keep you from living?" His hand shot out, gripping her chin with surprising gentleness. "You ask dangerous questions, Clara Ashford. Someone has to." For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. His gaze dropped to her lips, his thumb brushing across her jaw. The bond between them thrummed with possibility, with want, with the promise of something that terrified them both. Then a sharp knock shattered the moment. Caspian dropped his hand, stepping back as the door opened. Marcus, his personal attendant, stood in the doorway looking grim. "Your Majesty, there's been another attack. The rogues hit a homestead just past the eastern ridge. A family of 4, all dead." The warmth drained from Caspian's expression, replaced by cold calculation. "When?" "Within the last hour. The patrol found them during their rounds." "Assemble a hunting party. I want 50 of our best trackers and fighters ready to move within the hour." Caspian was already striding toward the door. "And send word to the outlying farms. Everyone pulls back to the fortified settlements until this is resolved." "Your Majesty," Marcus hesitated, "perhaps you shouldn't lead this hunt personally." "Let Commander Frost—" "I'll lead it," Caspian said flatly. "These rogues need to understand what happens when they attack my people." He was out the door before Clara could speak, his presence disappearing down the corridor like smoke. She stood frozen in the war room, her heart still racing from their almost kiss, her mind reeling from the sudden shift to violence. "Miss Ashford?" Marcus still stood in the doorway. "His Majesty will likely be gone for several days. Is there anything you need in the meantime?" Clara forced her thoughts to order. The family that was killed, did they have other relatives? Anyone who will need support? Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting the question. I'm not certain. I can inquire." "Please do. And if there are funerals to arrange, I'd like to attend." "Miss Ashford, with respect, you're not yet—" He stopped himself. "I'll make the inquiries." After he left, Clara stood alone in the vast room, surrounded by maps of territories she didn't understand and battle plans she couldn't read. She was a healer's daughter, raised to mend wounds and ease suffering, thrust into a world of politics and violence she had no training for. And her mate, the man she was bound to for life, was about to ride into danger without a backward glance. Her wolf howled in distress, demanding she follow, she protect, she stay close to their mate. But Clara had no horse, no weapons, no way to help even if she went. She'd only be a liability, exactly as Magistrate Thorne had said. The realization burned like acid. She spent the afternoon in her chamber, watching from her window as Caspian assembled his hunting party. 50 warriors, all mounted on massive horses bred for both speed and endurance, their weapons gleaming in the weak sunlight. Caspian sat astride a black stallion that looked barely tamed, his own weapons visible, a sword at his hip, a bow across his back, knives strapped to his thighs. He looked like what he was, a weapon himself, forged in violence and tempered by loss. He didn't look up at her window before riding out. The palace felt different with him gone, quieter, but also more tense, as if everyone was holding their breath. Clara tried to settle, tried to read from the books in the small library attached to her chamber, but the words wouldn't stick. Her mind kept circling back to Caspian, to the bond pulling tight in her chest, to the fear that he might not return. 3 days passed with no word. On the morning of the 4th day, Clara was summoned to Magistrate Thorne's office. The older woman sat behind a desk covered in papers, her expression severe. "Sit," she commanded. Clara sat, feeling like a child called before a strict teacher. "Since you are to be our queen," Magistrate Thorne began, her tone suggesting she'd rather discuss anything else, "you'll need instruction, protocol, history, law, all the things you currently lack." "I appreciate—" "I'm not doing this for you," Thorne interrupted. "I'm doing it because someone has to, and it might as well be me. His Majesty may have been forced into this bond, but I won't let his kingdom suffer for it." The words stung, but Clara kept her expression neutral. "When do we start?" "Now." Thorne pulled out a massive tome, dropping it on the desk with a thud that raised dust. "This is the complete history of the Northern Territory, dating back 400 years. You'll read it, all of it. There will be questions." The lessons that followed were brutal. Magistrate Thorne showed no mercy, drilling Clara on names, dates, territorial boundaries, and political alliances until her head spun. Every wrong answer earned a sharp correction, every hesitation a pointed reminder of her inadequacy. The Western Reach was ceded to the Northern Territory in what year? 1847? 1847, after the Battle of Broken Ridge. Context matters, girl. Again. By the time Thorne dismissed her, hours later, Clara's head was pounding and her confidence was in shreds. She stumbled back to her chamber, collapsing onto her bed. Her wolf whined softly, missing their mate. "I know," Clara whispered to the darkness. "I miss him too." On the 5th day, Clara attended the funeral for the slain family. It was held in a small chapel on the palace grounds, attended by perhaps 20 people, relatives, friends, fellow farmers. Clara sat in the back, feeling like an intruder, but when the service ended, a woman approached her. "You're the king's mate," she said. Not a question. "Yes." The woman's eyes were red from crying. "My sister was among the dead." Anna was her name. She had 2 little ones, both gone now. Clara's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Are you?" The woman's voice sharpened. "Or are you just here because it looks good? Because the future queen should appear to care?" The accusation hit like a slap. "I'm here because I do care, because your sister and her children deserved better than to die in fear." Pretty words. The woman turned away. "But words don't bring back the dead. What we need is action. We need the king to actually protect us, not just punish the rogues after we're already dead." She walked away before Clara could respond, leaving her standing alone in the chapel, the weight of failure heavy on her shoulders. That night, Clara dreamed of fire and blood, of screams in the darkness, and wolves tearing at flesh. She woke gasping, her nightgown drenched in sweat, her wolf howling in terror. The bond in her chest was pulling so hard it hurt, a physical ache that made breathing difficult. Something was wrong. Caspian was in danger, or hurt, or... She threw off her covers, pacing her chamber like a caged animal. The urge to shift, to run, to find him was overwhelming. Her wolf clawed at her control, desperate and wild. A knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Ashford?" Marcus's voice, urgent. "His Majesty has returned. He's asking for you." Clara didn't bother with a robe, just ran barefoot through the corridors, following Marcus through the palace to the infirmary wing. The smell of blood hit her before she reached the door, thick and coppery, mixed with the acrid scent of infected wounds. Inside, chaos reigned. Wounded warriors lay on cots, healers moving between them with bowls of water and bandages. And there, in the center of it all, sat Caspian on a bench, his shirt torn and bloodied, a deep gash running from his shoulder to his ribs. Their eyes met across the room, and the bond sang with relief and fury and need. Clara crossed to him without conscious thought, her hands already reaching for the wound. "What happened?" "Ambush," Caspian said, his voice rough with pain. "There were more rogues than we thought. At least 40, well organized. They were waiting for us." "This needs stitches," Clara said, examining the gash. It was deep but clean, not infected yet. "And you need to shift. That will help it heal faster." "Can't." Caspian's jaw tightened. "2 of my men are dead. 3 more critically injured. I won't rest until they're stable." "You won't help anyone by bleeding out," Clara snapped, her healer instincts overriding her fear of him. "Marcus, get me needle and thread, clean water, and bandages, now." To her surprise, Marcus obeyed without question, perhaps recognizing the authority in her voice. The same authority her father used when treating patients who argued. Clara worked quickly, cleaning the wound despite Caspian's occasional hisses of pain. Her hands were steady, guided by years of watching her father, of helping in the infirmary back home. The rhythm of it calmed her wolf, gave her purpose. "You're good at this," Caspian observed, watching her work. "My father taught me. Said every wolf should know basic healing, just in case." She threaded the needle. "This will hurt." "Everything hurts." But he didn't flinch as she began stitching, each pull of thread drawing the torn flesh back together. Around them, other healers worked on the wounded, but Clara was aware only of Caspian, of the warmth of his skin under her fingers, of the steady rhythm of his breathing. "The rogues," she said quietly. "Did you find their den?" "We found 3 dens. Killed maybe 20 of them, but the rest scattered into the mountains." His expression darkened. "They're more organized than typical rogues. Someone's leading them, giving them strategy. This wasn't random violence." Clara tied off the final stitch, cutting the thread. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone wants me distracted, wants my forces spread thin." Caspian stood carefully, testing the stitches. "The question is who and why?" A commotion at the infirmary door drew their attention. 2 warriors entered, carrying a third between them. The injured man was unconscious, his breathing shallow, his shirt soaked with blood. "Commander Frost," one of the warriors said urgently. "He went down protecting His Majesty, took a rogue's claws to the gut." The head healer rushed over, examining the wounds. After a moment, she looked up, her expression grim. "The damage is too severe. Even if he survives the night, infection will likely kill him within days." "I'm sorry, Your Majesty." "No," Caspian said flatly. "You don't get to be sorry. You fix him." "Your Majesty, I've done everything I can." "Then do more!" Caspian's voice cracked like thunder, his power filling the room. Several of the wounded whimpered, instinctively trying to make themselves smaller before their king's rage. Clara stepped forward, placing a hand on Caspian's arm. "Let me look at him." The head healer frowned. "Miss Ashford, with respect, if I cannot save him, just let me look," Clara repeated, moving toward Commander Frost's cot. She'd never attempted anything this serious before, had only watched her father work on similar injuries. But something in her, some instinct she didn't fully understand, insisted she could help. She placed her hands on Frost's abdomen, feeling the torn muscle and damaged organs beneath. Her wolf stirred, pressing forward, and suddenly Clara felt it, a warmth spreading from her palms into Frost's body, seeking out the wounds, knitting torn flesh back together. The room went silent. Magistrate Thorne's voice cut through the quiet. "She's a healer, a true healer." Clara didn't understand what that meant, too focused on the work. The warmth continued to flow, guided by instinct more than knowledge. Frost's breathing steadied, his color improving slightly. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. Finally, exhausted, Clara stepped back. Frost was stable, still unconscious, still injured, but no longer dying. "How?" the head healer breathed, staring at Clara with something between awe and fear. "I don't know," Clara admitted, swaying slightly. Caspian's hand shot out, steadying her. "I just felt what needed to be done." "True healers are born once a generation," Magistrate Thorne said, her voice oddly respectful. They can channel their wolf's energy into healing others. It's a rare gift, extremely powerful. Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. And suddenly, Miss Ashford, you're far more valuable than we realized. The words should have been a comfort, but the way Thorne said them, with calculation rather than warmth, made Clara's skin crawl. Caspian's grip on her arm tightened possessively. She's not a tool to be used. Of course not, Your Majesty, Thorne said smoothly. But a queen who can heal? That changes everything. Clara looked up at Caspian, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. She'd come here as nothing, as a liability, as a mistake of fate. Now she was something else, something valuable. And in a palace built on power and politics, valuable wasn't the same as safe. And somewhere in the cold palace, in the space between duty and desire, between fear and hope, something began to thaw. The gardens behind the palace were nothing like Clara expected. She'd imagined dead things, frozen earth and skeletal branches, a reflection of the man who ruled here. Instead, she found herself walking through carefully tended paths lined with winter roses and evergreens, their scent sharp and clean in the cold air. Caspian's hand remained in hers, his grip neither tight nor loose, just present, real. The bond hummed between them, that invisible thread growing stronger with each step. Her wolf, usually so timid, was practically purring. This was Lyanna's project, Caspian said quietly, startling Clara from her thoughts. She insisted that even in the harshest territory, beauty could survive. She planted most of these herself. Clara looked at the roses, their deep crimson petals edged with frost. They're beautiful. She was too. He stopped walking, his gaze distant. Everyone thought I chose her because of her pack's military strength, because of political advantage. But the truth is, he paused, jaw tightening. The truth is, I loved her. Actually loved her, before the bond even snapped into place. That's what made losing her unbearable. Clara squeezed his hand gently. You don't have to tell me this. Yes, I do. He turned to face her fully. Because you need to understand what you're walking into. I'm not some romantic figure waiting to be saved by the right woman. I'm broken, Clara. I buried the pieces of myself that could feel, that could care, because feeling meant pain. His silver eyes searched hers. And now you're here, and the bond is forcing those pieces back to the surface, and I don't know if I can survive being broken again. The raw honesty in his voice made Clara's chest ache. I'm not asking you to love me. The bond will demand it eventually. That's how true mates work. The pull becomes irresistible. We'll bond, we'll mate, and then he looked away. Then I'll have something to lose again. Then we'll both have something to lose, Clara corrected softly. You're not the only one at risk here, Caspian. I'm terrified too. He looked at her sharply. Of me? Of this. Of everything. She gestured around them. 3 days ago, I was invisible. The girl no one noticed, with the weak wolf no one wanted. And now I'm supposed to be a queen? To stand beside the most powerful Lycan King in 3 territories? To face down council members and nobles who already hate me? She laughed, the sound brittle. I'm not brave, I'm not strong. I'm just someone who happened to be standing in the right place when fate decided to play a joke. Caspian's expression shifted, something like understanding flickering in his eyes. You think this is a joke? Isn't it? Look at me. Clara pulled her hand free, spreading her arms. I can barely shift without exhausting myself. My wolf is the size of most packs' juveniles. I know healing herbs and how to stitch wounds, but I can't fight, can't hunt, can't do any of the things a Lycan queen should. Stop. The command in his voice halted her mid-sentence. Stop diminishing yourself. I'm not diminishing myself. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. The word hit like a slap. Clara's wolf snarled, suddenly defensive. Excuse me? You heard me. Caspian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You stand there listing everything you can't do, everything you're not, as if that's all you are. But I watched you yesterday, Clara. I watched you walk into a throne room full of women who wanted to tear you apart, with nothing but a homespun cloak and a timid wolf. And you looked me in the eye and told me I needed honesty. His voice dropped. That took more courage than any of their elaborate presentations. More courage than half my warriors show on the battlefield. Clara's breath caught. That's not... You asked me what I believe in, he interrupted. I told you duty, safety, walls high enough to keep out the pain. But you know what Liana believed in? He gestured to the roses around them. She believed that strength comes in different forms, that the wolf who heals is as valuable as the wolf who fights, that softness isn't weakness, it's a different kind of power. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. I buried that belief with her, told myself it was naive, that only hard things survive in a hard world. His thumb traced her jawline. And then you walked in, proving me wrong. Clara's pulse hammered. The touch sent electricity through the bond, making her wolf whine with need. Caspian, I'm not asking you to be something you're not, he said quietly. I'm asking you to stop apologizing for what you are. Before Clara could respond, a horn blast shattered the moment. Caspian's head snapped up, his entire body going rigid. The horn sounded again, 3 short bursts followed by one long. Rogues, he growled, already moving, at the eastern border. Clara hurried after him as he strode back toward the palace, guards appearing from seemingly nowhere to flank them. Rogues? Wolves without packs, usually exiles or criminals. He didn't slow down. They've been testing our borders for months, getting bolder. This is the first time they've attacked in daylight. They burst into the palace's great hall where chaos reigned. Warriors were arming themselves, strapping on weapons and armor with practiced efficiency. Caspian's advisors clustered near the war table, arguing in raised voices. Your Majesty! The gray-bearded advisor, Clara thought his name was Rothgar, rushed forward. A raiding party, at least 20 rogues. They've breached the eastern watchtower and are moving toward the village. Caspian's expression went cold, every trace of the vulnerable man from the garden vanishing. This was the Lycan King, the warrior who had united 3 territories through strength and fear. Mobilize the 2nd and 3rd companies. I want them surrounded and captured. No escapes. Your Majesty, perhaps you should remain here, another advisor suggested nervously. Let Commander Thorn handle. I lead my warriors, Caspian cut him off. Always. He turned to Marcus. Take Miss Ashford to the secured wing. No one in or out until I return. Wait. Clara grabbed his arm before she could think better of it. Let me help. Every head in the room turned to stare at her. Caspian's expression was incredulous. Absolutely not. I'm a healer, Clara insisted. If there are wounded, my healers will handle it. You stay here where it's safe. I'm not some delicate flower that needs protecting, Clara shot back, her wolf rising with indignation. I know I can't fight, but I can help. It's what I'm trained for. Caspian's jaw tightened. Clara, you just told me to stop apologizing for what I am, she interrupted, matching his intensity. Well, this is what I am, a healer. Let me do what I'm good at. They stared at each other, the bond between them crackling with tension. Around them, warriors shifted uncomfortably, unused to seeing their king challenged. Finally, Caspian exhaled sharply. Fine, but you stay with Marcus at all times. You go nowhere near the fighting, and if I say run, you run. Understood? Understood. He held her gaze a moment longer, something complicated flickering in his silver eyes. Then he turned to his commanders. Move out. Kill only if necessary. I want prisoners who can tell us who's organizing these attacks. The warriors flooded out, their boots thundering on stone. Clara found herself swept along with Marcus and a handful of guards, following at a distance as the main force headed east. They traveled fast, moving through the palace grounds and into the forest beyond at a pace that left Clara breathless. The sounds of battle reached them before they saw it, snarls and howls, the clash of metal, screams of pain. Marcus pulled Clara behind a rocky outcropping that overlooked a clearing where chaos reigned. Caspian's warriors were everywhere, massive wolves in various shades of gray and black, fighting with brutal efficiency. The rogues were outnumbered, but fighting viciously, their eyes wild with desperation or madness. Clara watched Caspian himself, shifted into a wolf the size of a small horse, his fur black as midnight and eyes glowing silver. He moved like violence made flesh, taking down 2 rogues in quick succession, but it was the bodies that made Clara's healer instincts kick in. Warriors from both sides lay scattered across the clearing, some moving weakly, others ominously still. Blood stained the snow. I need to get down there, Clara said. Marcus grabbed her arm. Absolutely not. The king said, "Look." Clara pointed to a young warrior pinned beneath a fallen rogue, blood pooling beneath him. He's bleeding out. Another 2 minutes and he's dead. Miss Ashford, please. Clara yanked her arm free and ran. She heard Marcus curse behind her, heard guards scrambling to follow, but she focused on reaching the wounded warrior. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands already assessing the damage. Deep gash across his abdomen, possibly nicking his liver. Critical, but survivable if she acted fast. Her healer's bag was back at the palace, but Clara had learned to improvise. She tore strips from her dress, pressing them against the wound with firm pressure. The warrior's eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain. "Stay with me," Clara commanded. "What's your name?" Thomas, he gasped. "Thomas, I need you to put pressure here while I—" A snarl made her look up. A rogue wolf, smaller than the others but with maddened eyes, was charging straight at them. Clara's wolf whimpered in terror, knowing she couldn't shift fast enough, couldn't fight even if she did. A black blur intercepted the rogue mid-leap. Caspian, still in wolf form, drove the attacker into the ground with savage force. The fight was brief and brutal. When Caspian rose, the rogue didn't. He shifted back to human form in a ripple of power, standing naked and blood-spattered, his silver eyes blazing with fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Saving his life," Clara said, not looking up from Thomas. "Hold this. Press down. Hard." For a moment, Caspian just stared at her. Then, incredibly, he dropped to his knees beside her and did as she asked, his large hands replacing hers on the makeshift bandage. "I need yarrow and comfrey," Clara said, scanning the area. "There, growing near a fallen log." She scrambled over, grabbing handfuls of the plants, crushing them between her palms to release their healing properties. She packed the mixture into Thomas's wound, murmuring instructions to Caspian, who followed them with surprising gentleness. Around them, the battle was ending. The rogues were either dead or captured, dragged away by warriors. But more wounded were emerging, limping or being carried by their fellows. Clara worked through them methodically. A shoulder dislocation, she popped it back into place with practiced efficiency. A deep bite wound, cleaned and packed with herbs. Burns from silver weapons, salved with a mixture she improvised from pine sap and winter rose petals. She was stitching a gash on a warrior's thigh when she heard the whispers starting. "Is that the king's chosen?" The healer's daughter, working like a common field medic. "She's got steady hands, I'll give her that." Saved young Thomas. He'd be dead without her. Clara ignored them, focused on her work. Caspian appeared beside her again, now dressed in borrowed clothes, and didn't leave. He assisted without being asked, holding warriors still when she needed to stitch, fetching water, even helping to splint a broken leg. "You're good at this," he murmured as she finished with the last wounded warrior. "It's all I'm good at," Clara said, wiping blood from her hands. "That's not true." His voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. "But it's enough. More than enough." She looked up at him, finding something soft in his expression that made her chest tight. Before she could respond, Commander Thorne approached, a grizzled warrior with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. "Your Majesty, we've secured the prisoners. 15 rogues, still alive." "Good, take them to the holding cells. I'll question them myself." Caspian's expression hardened. "And double the border patrols. This was coordinated, which means someone's organizing them." "Yes, Your Majesty." Thorne hesitated. "Sir, about Miss Ashford. The warriors are talking, saying she ran into active combat to save Thomas." "I'm aware. It's made an impression. A good one." Thorne actually smiled slightly. "They're calling her the Healing Queen." Clara's cheeks flushed. "That's ridiculous. I just did what anyone wouldn't," Caspian interrupted. "Most nobles would have stayed safely behind the lines. You ran toward danger to save a warrior you'd never met." His silver eyes held hers. "Like I said, courage comes in different forms." The journey back to the palace was slower, the warriors carrying their wounded with care. Clara found herself walking beside Caspian, hyper-aware of the bond humming between them, stronger now after working side by side. "You were right," Caspian said quietly as they entered the palace grounds. "About helping. I was wrong to try to keep you locked away. You were trying to keep me safe. I was trying to control the situation, to control you. He stopped walking, turning to face her. That's what I do. Control things, eliminate variables, minimize risk. But you're not a variable to be managed, Clara. And I need to stop treating you like one. Before Clara could respond, Hrothgar appeared, his face pale. Your Majesty, urgent news. The prisoners, one of them is talking. You need to hear this. They followed him to the dungeons beneath the palace, a place of iron and stone that smelled of damp and despair. The rogue who'd talked was chained to the wall, his face bruised from the battle. He looked up as they approached, his eyes focusing on Caspian with a mix of fear and defiance. Tell the king what you told me, Hrothgar commanded. The rogue spat blood. We were hired, paid to test your borders, to cause chaos. Caspian's expression didn't change, but Clara felt his fury through the bond. By who? Don't know his name, worked through intermediaries. The rogue grinned, showing broken teeth. But I know what he wanted. Wanted us to draw you out, to keep you busy with border raids while he worked on the real plan. What plan? The council. The rogue's grin widened. Someone on your own council wants you dead, Lycan King, and they're going to make their move soon. The words hung in the cold air like a death sentence. Clara's blood went cold. Caspian's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. Who? He demanded. Told you. I don't know. We were just hired muscle, meant to be a distraction. The rogue's eyes slid to Clara. But I'd watch my back if I was the little healer. Word is, they don't much like the idea of a weak queen. Might have an accident, if you know what I mean. Caspian moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment he was beside her. The next he had the rogue by the throat, lifted off the ground. If you or anyone else touches her, I will make your death last days, understood? The rogue gurgled something that might have been agreement. Caspian dropped him and strode from the dungeon, his rage palpable. Clara hurried after him, her mind reeling. Caspian, wait! He spun on her in the corridor above, his eyes blazing. This is my fault. I should have anticipated this. The council was already unhappy with my choice, and now we know there's a traitor among them, Clara finished. That's valuable information. Valuable? He laughed harshly. You're in danger, Clara, real danger, and I can't… He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I can't protect you from my own council. Can't lock them all up on the word of a rogue. Can't even be sure which ones are loyal. Clara's mind raced, that same clarity she'd felt in the battle settling over her. Then we find out. We watch them, we listen, we figure out who's behind this. You want to use yourself as bait? Caspian's voice was incredulous. Absolutely not. I want to solve this before it gets worse. Clara stepped closer, looking up at him. You said I wasn't a variable to be managed, so don't manage me. Trust me to help with this. Trust you to walk into danger. Trust me to be strong in my own way, she corrected. You fight with teeth and claws. I fight with observation and healing and seeing what others miss. Let me use those skills. They stared at each other, the bond between them pulled taut with tension. Finally, Caspian exhaled. The council meets tomorrow, a mandatory session to discuss the rogue attacks and our upcoming bonding ceremony. Then tomorrow we watch them, Clara said firmly, together. Caspian studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Together. The word felt like a promise and a threat, all at once. The council chamber was everything Clara had feared, a room designed for power and intimidation. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by pillars carved with wolves in various battle poses. A circular table of black oak dominated the center, with 12 chairs for the council members and one throne-like seat for the king. Clara sat beside Caspian, acutely aware that her simple chair was a recent addition, that she didn't belong here, that every eye kept sliding to her with barely concealed contempt. Let us begin, Caspian said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Commander Thorne, your report on yesterday's attack. Thorne stood, outlining the battle with military precision. The council members listened, asking sharp questions about casualties and defensive gaps. Clara watched them carefully, 12 men and women representing the major pacts and territories under Caspian's rule. Hrothgar, the gray-bearded advisor, his expression perpetually disapproving. Lady Morven, an elderly woman with shrewd eyes who ruled the southern pack. Lord Blackwood, young and ambitious, his gaze constantly calculating. And on it went, each council member a mix of power and politics. The question, Lady Morven said when Thorne finished, is why these attacks are escalating. We've had rogue problems before, but nothing this organized. That's what the interrogations are attempting to determine, Caspian replied. Perhaps if certain distractions hadn't occupied your Majesty's attention, you might have noticed the pattern sooner, Hrothgar said, his gaze flickering to Clara. The bond flared with Caspian's anger, but his voice remained controlled. Careful, Hrothgar. I speak only out of concern for the kingdom, your Majesty. These are dangerous times. We need our king focused, not... He paused delicately. Otherwise engaged. You mean with me? Clara said quietly. Every head turned toward her. Caspian's hand found hers under the table, squeezing in warning, but Clara had already committed. You think I'm a distraction, she continued, meeting Hrothgar's gaze. A weakness that makes the king vulnerable. I think, Hrothgar said carefully, that a ruler's choice of mate affects the entire kingdom. And when that choice is unexpected, it raises questions. What questions? Caspian's voice was dangerously soft. About judgment, Lord Blackwood interjected smoothly. About whether personal desires are clouding strategic thinking. With respect, your Majesty, Miss Ashford comes from a minor pack with no military strength, no political advantage, no... She saved 6 warriors yesterday, Commander Thorne interrupted, his gruff voice surprising everyone. Ran into active combat while half the nobles in this kingdom were hiding in their estates. Thomas would be dead without her. So would Garrett and young Elena. Healing is admirable, Lady Morven said, but it doesn't make her qualified to be queen. And what does qualify someone? Clara asked. Political connections? A powerful wolf? The ability to smile prettily while men make decisions? She stood, her chair scraping back. I know I'm not what any of you wanted, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. The silence that followed was deafening. Caspian stood beside her, his presence a wall of support. Miss Ashford is my chosen mate. That decision is final. If anyone on this council has a problem with it, you're welcome to tender your resignation. No one moved. Good. Now, back to the actual threat. These rogue attacks are coordinated, which suggests organization and funding. I want increased intelligence gathering, doubled patrols, and a full review of our border security. Caspian's gaze swept the table. Meeting adjourned. The council members filed out, some throwing dark looks at Clara, others carefully neutral. When the chamber was empty except for them and Thorne, Caspian turned to the commander. Your honest assessment. Who can I trust on that council? Thorne was quiet for a moment. Lady Morven is loyal to you, even if she disapproves of your choice. Same with Lord Greythorn. He's practical above all else. But Hrothgar... He hesitated. Hrothgar has been vocal about his concerns, and Lord Blackwood is ambitious. Either could be behind this, or neither. Without proof, we have nothing, Caspian finished grimly. I might be able to help with that, Clara said slowly. Both men turned to her. Hrothgar mentioned something in the meeting, said the king might have noticed the pattern sooner if he hadn't been distracted. But how did he know about the pattern? Commander Thorne just reported it today. Thorne's eyes sharpened. You're right. The attack summaries haven't been distributed yet. Only the king and I knew about the coordination pattern. Unless someone's been receiving their own intelligence, Caspian said softly. Intelligence they shouldn't have access to. Or unless they're the ones giving orders to the rogues, Clara added. Caspian paced to the window, his mind clearly racing. We need proof. Real proof. Not just suspicious phrasing. He turned back to them. Thorne, I want surveillance on Hrothgar. Discreet, but thorough. Who he meets with, what messages he sends, everything. Your Majesty, if he discovers he's being watched, then we'll know we're looking in the right direction. Caspian's expression was cold. I won't move against a council member without evidence, but I won't ignore a potential threat either. As Thorne left to arrange the surveillance, Clara moved to stand beside Caspian at the window. Below, the palace grounds stretched out, warriors training in the yards, servants going about their duties. Normal life, unaware of the knife hovering above them all. You were magnificent in there, Caspian said quietly. Clara laughed. I was terrified. That's what made it magnificent. You were terrified and you did it anyway. He turned to face her. But Clara, this is dangerous. If Hrothgar is behind the attacks, if he realizes you're helping investigate him, then we'd better find proof quickly, Clara said firmly. Caspian's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. I don't want to lose you. I've already lost. His voice caught. I can't go through that again. Then don't, Clara said softly. Don't push me away trying to keep me safe. Keep me close, where we can protect each other. For a long moment they stood there, the bond between them singing with connection. Then Caspian leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, and Clara felt the walls he'd built around his heart trembling. I'm trying, he whispered. I'm trying to let you in. But every instinct I have says caring about someone means giving them the power to destroy you. Maybe, Clara murmured, or maybe it means giving someone the power to save you. Before he could respond, the door burst open. Marcus stood there, his face pale. Your Majesty, there's been an incident. It's Miss Ashford's father. He's here and he's demanding to see her. But there's a problem. Clara's heart stopped. What problem? Marcus's expression was grim. He's been poisoned. The world tilted. Clara was running before she'd consciously decided to move, racing through corridors with Caspian beside her, their bond screaming with shared alarm. They burst into the infirmary to find Clara's father lying on a cot, his face gray, his breathing labored. Papa! Clara dropped to her knees beside him, her healer's hands already checking his pulse, his pupils, the color of his lips. Wolfsbane poisoning, her mind supplied clinically, even as her heart shattered. Advanced stages, someone had dosed him heavily. Clara, her father gasped, his hand finding hers. Had to warn you. Found out. Council member. Meeting with rogues. Saw him. Near border. When I tried to tell guards, they gave me water. His breath rattled. Poisoned. Don't talk, Clara commanded, her voice breaking. Save your strength. I can fix this. I can... But even as she said it, she knew the truth. Wolfsbane poisoning this advanced. In someone his age, her father was dying. Who? Caspian demanded, kneeling on the other side of the cot. Which council member did you see? Clara's father's eyes were already glazing. Hrothgar. Meeting with rogue leader. Planning something big. Soon. His hand went slack in Clara's grip. No, Clara whispered. No, Papa, please. Stay with me. I can fix this. Just stay. But he was gone. The light faded from his eyes, his chest stilling, and Clara felt the world collapse around her. Her father, the man who'd taught her to heal, who'd believed in her when no one else did, who'd sent her to this palace knowing he might never see her again. Clara! Caspian's arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The grief was a physical thing, crushing her lungs, stopping her heart. But underneath it, burning brighter with each passing second, was rage. Hrothgar did this, she said, her voice shaking. He poisoned my father to keep him quiet, to stop him from warning us. We'll make him pay, Caspian promised, his voice deadly. I swear to you, Clara, Your Majesty! A guard burst in, wild-eyed. The council chamber, there's been an explosion. Half the building is on fire and... He swallowed hard. Hrothgar's been found dead inside. Murdered. Clara's head snapped up. Caspian went rigid. What? He demanded. Stabbed, Your Majesty, multiple times, and there's a message written in blood on the wall. The guard's voice shook. It says, the weak queen dies next. The world seemed to slow down. Clara looked at her father's body, then at Caspian's face, shock and rage and fear warring in his silver eyes. Someone had just killed the man they'd suspected, framed Clara as the next target, and blown up half the council building. This wasn't just a political coup. This was war. And Clara, still kneeling beside her father's cooling body, her dress stained with his blood and her heart shattered into pieces, realized with cold clarity that everything was about to get much worse. The bond in her chest pulled tight, connecting her to Caspian in a way that was both comfort and curse. Because loving someone didn't just give them the power to save you, it gave them the power to be used against you. And whoever was behind this had just figured that out. The news of Clara's healing ability spread through the palace like wildfire through dry brush. By morning, servants whispered about it in corridors. Guards exchanged glances when she passed, and the council members regarded her with newfound wariness, masked as respect. Commander Frost remained in the infirmary under observation, his recovery progressing at a rate that defied the head healer's most optimistic predictions. The deep wounds that should have killed him were already knitting together, pink flesh replacing torn muscle. Clara stood at her chamber window, watching the sun climb over the eastern mountains, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She hadn't slept after healing Frost, too wired with adrenaline and confusion about what she'd done. The warmth that had flowed through her hands felt like an echo now, a phantom sensation she couldn't quite recapture. "You should rest," Caspian said from the doorway. She hadn't heard him enter, but she was becoming accustomed to his silent movements, the way he could materialize like smoke when he chose. "I can't," Clara admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I feel it again. That energy, or power, or whatever it was." He crossed the room to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. His stitches held, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way he favored his injured side. "My father once told me about true healers," he said quietly. "Said they were gifts to their packs, capable of saving lives that would otherwise be lost. But he also said they were targets." Clara's stomach dropped. Targets? A healer who can mend fatal wounds, who can keep warriors fighting when they should be dead. That's a strategic asset, one that enemies would kill to possess or eliminate. His silver eyes met hers. "You just became far more dangerous to keep alive." The word should have terrified her. Instead, Clara felt something like resolve settling in her chest. "Then we'll have to make sure I'm worth protecting." Caspian's lips twitched, almost a smile. "We? You're stuck with me, remember? True mate bond, whether you like it or not." Clara turned to face him fully. "And I'm stuck with you, so we might as well figure out how to make this work." He studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You're not afraid of me." "Should I be?" "Most people are." "I'm not most people." Clara reached up, touching the edge of the bandage visible beneath his collar. "And you're not as scary as you think you are." Caspian caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. "Don't mistake restraint for weakness, Clara. I've killed more people than you've healed. I'm capable of things that would give you nightmares." "I know." She didn't pull away. "But you're also capable of caring, even if you pretend you're not. You rode into danger to protect your people. You refused to rest until your warriors were stable. That's not the behavior of a man who feels nothing." His thumb brushed across her pulse point, feeling the rapid flutter of her heartbeat. "You see things that aren't there. Or maybe you hide things that are." The bond between them pulled taut, humming with tension and possibility. Caspian's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a heartbeat, Clara thought he might close the distance between them, might finally bridge the gap he'd been maintaining since they met. A sharp knock shattered the moment. "Your Majesty," Marcus called through the door, his voice urgent. "The council requests an emergency meeting. It's about the rogue situation." Caspian released Clara's wrist, stepping back with visible reluctance. "I'll be there shortly." He looked at Clara, his expression unreadable. "You should come. They'll want to discuss your abilities." The council chamber was already full when they arrived, tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. Magistrate Thorne stood at the head of the table, maps spread before her, marked with red pins that Clara assumed indicated attack sites. The other counselors looked grim, their wolves radiating agitation. "Your Majesty," Thorne began without preamble, "we've received reports of 3 more attacks overnight. 1 on the southern farms, 2 on mining outposts in the western hills. 7 dead, 12 wounded." Caspian's jaw tightened. "Survivors?" "Being brought to the palace infirmary as we speak." Thorne's gaze shifted to Clara. "Which brings us to Miss Ashford's newly revealed capabilities." "Her name is Clara," Caspian said coldly. Use it. Thorn inclined her head slightly. Clara, then. Your healing ability changes our strategic position considerably. If you can save warriors who would otherwise die, we can afford to take more aggressive action against the rogues. Clara felt ice slide down her spine. You want to use me as a safety net so your soldiers can be more reckless? I want to use our resources effectively, Thorn corrected. You're a resource now, whether you like it or not. She's the future queen, Caspian interjected, his voice dangerous. Not a tool for your military strategies. With respect, Your Majesty, she's both. Cornelius spoke up, his expression apologetic but firm. We cannot ignore the tactical advantage she provides. If Clara can heal fatal wounds, we need to consider how that capability can best serve the kingdom. Clara looked around the table, seeing the calculations in their eyes. To them, she'd gone from worthless to valuable in a single night, but the fundamental view hadn't changed. She was still just an object to be used, just for different purposes now. No, she said quietly. Every eye turned to her. Magistrate Thorn's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? I said no. Clara stood, meeting their gazes steadily despite the fear churning in her gut. I'm not going to be a bandage for poor military planning. I'll heal the wounded because it's the right thing to do, because people are suffering. But I won't enable recklessness that gets people killed just because you think I can fix them afterward. You don't have the authority to refuse, Thorn said sharply. Actually, she does, Caspian interjected, his tone brooking no argument. As my mate and your future queen, her authority is second only to mine. If she says no, the answer is no. Thorn's expression hardened. Then perhaps, Your Majesty, we should discuss whether this bond is truly in the kingdom's best interest. A queen who refuses to serve her people. I'm not refusing to serve, Clara interrupted, her voice stronger now. I'm refusing to be used. There's a difference. She looked at Caspian, drawing strength from the approval she saw in his eyes. The real question is why these attacks are happening at all. Commander Frost said the rogues were organized, that someone was leading them. Instead of planning how to throw more warriors at the problem, shouldn't we be figuring out who's behind it and why? Silence fell over the chamber. The scarred counselor, Clara had learned his name was Vex, leaned forward. She has a point. These attacks are too coordinated for random rogue behavior. Someone's orchestrating them. But who? Cornelius asked. And to what end? To make us look weak, Clara said, the pieces clicking together in her mind. Think about it. A new queen appears out of nowhere from a nothing pack, chosen over powerful alliances. Then suddenly coordinated attacks begin, making it seem like the king is distracted, like his choice has weakened the kingdom. It's designed to undermine confidence in Caspian's leadership. Caspian's eyes sharpened. Which means the enemy isn't the rogues. They're just weapons. The real enemy is someone who benefits from destabilizing my rule. The Eastern Pacts, Thorn breathed. They've been pushing for territorial concessions for years. If they can make you appear weak, unable to protect your own people, they can justify a challenge for leadership, Vex finished, or outright invasion, claiming they're liberating the oppressed territories. The implications hung heavy in the air. Clara felt the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. This was bigger than rogue attacks, bigger than her own inadequacy. This was politics and power on a scale she'd never imagined. We need proof, Caspian said, his voice calm despite the tension radiating from him. Accusations without evidence will only make us look desperate. Vex, I want intelligence gathered on the Eastern Pact movements. Cornelius, audit our border defenses. Thorn, compile everything we know about the attack patterns, times, locations, casualties. Look for connections. The counselors nodded, already rising to implement his orders. Caspian turned to Clara. You'll focus on the wounded, but on your terms, not theirs. After the council dispersed, Clara made her way to the infirmary. The new wounded had arrived, laid out on cots in varying states of distress. The head healer, a woman named Meredith, looked up with undisguised relief when Clara entered. Thank the moon, Meredith said. We've got 2 critical cases. Without your help, they won't make it till nightfall. Clara moved to the first patient, a young warrior with a crushed chest and labored breathing. His wolf was trying to heal him, but the damage was too severe, his body shutting down despite its best efforts. She placed her hands on his sternum, closing her eyes, reaching for that warmth she'd felt with Commander Frost. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, like a dam breaking, the energy flooded through her. She gasped at the intensity of it, her wolf surging forward to guide the flow. Heat poured from her palms into the warrior's broken body, knitting bone, mending torn tissue, coaxing damaged organs back to function. When she opened her eyes, the warrior's breathing had steadied, his color returning. He'd live. The second patient was worse, a woman with deep claw marks across her abdomen, intestines visible through the torn flesh. Clara had to fight down nausea as she worked, the healing more complex, requiring finer control. She felt her energy draining rapidly, her vision starting to blur, but she pushed through until the wounds closed, until the woman's pulse strengthened. Clara stumbled back, caught by strong hands. Caspian had appeared beside her without her noticing, his face tight with concern. "That's enough. You're exhausted. There are more, and they'll still be here after you rest." He guided her toward a chair, practically forcing her to sit. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." Meredith brought water, which Clara drank gratefully. Around them, other healers tended to the less critical patients, their expressions a mixture of awe and envy as they glanced at Clara. "I've never seen anything like it," Meredith said quietly to Caspian. "True healers are legends in the texts, but I never thought I'd witness one in action. She's remarkable." "She's also not a miracle worker," Caspian replied, his tone sharp. "Don't treat her like a resource to be drained dry." Meredith bowed her head. "Of course, Your Majesty." Clara finished the water, her hands still trembling slightly. The warmth had faded, leaving her feeling hollow and cold. But two people who would have died were now stable, would recover. That had to count for something. "Come on," Caspian said, helping her stand. "You need actual rest." He led her not back to her chamber but to his own quarters, a suite of rooms in the northern tower that Clara had never seen. They were surprisingly sparse. A bed, a desk covered in papers, shelves lined with books and weapons. No personal touches, no decorations, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here rather than simply existed. "Sit," Caspian commanded, pointing to the bed. Clara sank onto the mattress, which was far more comfortable than her own. "I'm fine, really. You're trembling, your skin is clammy, and you can barely stand." He moved to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle and 2 glasses. "Drink this." The liquid was amber and burned going down, but it sent warmth spreading through Clara's chest, pushing back the cold. She coughed, her eyes watering. "What is that?" "Whiskey. Helps with the shock." Caspian sat beside her, his weight dipping the mattress. "Healing takes energy from your own life force. Do too much, and you'll burn yourself out permanently." "How do you know?" "My father's pack had a true healer when I was young. Woman named Iris. She could work miracles, save people from the brink of death." His voice went distant. "During a particularly brutal winter, plague swept through the territory. Iris worked for days without stopping, healing everyone she could reach. She saved hundreds." "What happened to her?" "She died, exhausted her life force completely, just burned out like a candle." He turned to look at Clara, his silver eyes serious. "You have to pace yourself, set limits. Learn when to say no, even if people are dying." The thought made Clara's stomach turn. "How can I say no when I could save them?" "Because if you don't, you'll end up like Iris. Dead before your 30th year, your gift wasted because you gave too much too fast." His hand covered hers, warm and solid. "I won't let that happen to you." "Why do you care?" The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. "You didn't want this bond. You don't want a mate. So why does it matter if I burn myself out?" Caspian was quiet for so long that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he said, "Because despite my best efforts, I'm starting to care. And that terrifies me more than any enemy army." Clara's breath caught. "Caspian." "When Liana died, something inside me broke," he continued, his voice rough. "I swore I'd never feel that kind of pain again, never give anyone the power to destroy me. For 19 years, I kept that promise. I ruled through strength and fear, kept everyone at arm's length, turned myself into exactly what my kingdom needed, a weapon, not a man." He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made Clara's chest ache. "Then you walked into my throne room with your soft wolf and your honest eyes, and the bond snapped into place like it had been waiting, like fate was laughing at my pathetic attempts to protect myself. I never wanted to hurt you, Clara said softly. I know. That's what makes it worse. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You're kind and brave and everything I have no defense against. And every day, despite my best efforts, you matter a little bit more. Clara shifted closer, eliminating the careful distance he always maintained. Would it be so terrible to let yourself care again? Yes, he said bluntly, because when you die, and everyone dies eventually, it will destroy me, again, and I barely survived it the first time. So your solution is to live half a life, to never let anyone close because you're afraid of losing them? Clara cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. That's not living, Caspian. That's just existing, going through the motions until death finally takes you. It's safer. It's lonely. She leaned her forehead against his. And you don't have to be lonely anymore. I'm here. Whether you want me or not, I'm here. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Caspian's hand came up to tangle in her hair, tilting her head back. His eyes searched hers, looking for something Clara couldn't name. This is a mistake, he whispered. Probably, Clara agreed. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and hungry. 19 years of loneliness and denial breaking free in a single moment. Clara gasped against his mouth, her hands fisting in his shirt, the bond between them singing with rightness and completion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caspian rested his forehead against hers again. I'm going to hurt you, he said quietly. I'm broken in ways you can't fix, no matter how powerful your healing is. Maybe, Clara said, or maybe we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. You're too good for me. Probably, Clara repeated, making him smile. An actual smile, not the cruel twist of lips she'd seen before, but something genuine and warm that transformed his entire face. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other, the world outside temporarily forgotten. But eventually, reality intruded in the form of another knock at the door. Your Majesty, Marcus called. Forgive the interruption, but there's been a development. One of the captured rogues is willing to talk. Caspian pulled back reluctantly, his expression shifting back to the cold mask of a king. I'll be there shortly. He looked at Clara. Stay here. Rest. That's not a request. I want to hear what the rogue says. Clara, if this is about destabilizing your rule, it affects me too. I'm your mate, your future queen. I should be there. She stood, wobbling only slightly. Besides, you said my authority is second to yours. So unless you're ordering me to stay, I'm coming. Caspian's jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded. Fine. But if you start to feel weak, you tell me immediately. They made their way to the dungeons, deep beneath the palace where the stone walls wept moisture and the air tasted of earth and despair. The rogue was chained in a cell, a young man, barely more than a boy, with wild eyes and matted hair. He stank of fear and unwashed bodies, his wolf lurking close to the surface in agitation. Commander Frost was there despite his recent injuries, along with Vex and 2 guards. Frost straightened when Caspian entered, bowing his head. Your Majesty, the prisoner claims he has information about who's organizing the attacks. Caspian's gaze fixed on the rogue like a predator sighting prey. Talk. The boy swallowed hard. I don't know names, but there's a man, comes to the camp sometimes. Tall, scarred face, speaks with an Eastern accent. He pays us in gold and weapons, tells us where to strike, when to attack. Description, Caspian demanded. Like I said, tall, maybe 6.5 feet, scar running from his left eye to his jaw, missing 2 fingers on his right hand, wears all black, rides a gray horse. Vex stiffened. That sounds like Cain Bloodworth. He's a mercenary, works for whoever pays best. Last I heard, he was in the Eastern Territory. Which confirms they're behind this, Frost said grimly. Caspian's expression was carved from ice. What else? The rogue hesitated. The man said, once the king is weakened enough, once the people lose faith, the Eastern Alpha will march on the palace. Claims he has a rightful claim to leadership, that you stole your throne. Ridiculous, Vex spat. Caspian won his crown in fair combat against 3 challengers. His claim is absolute. Truth doesn't matter if people believe the lie, Clara said quietly. Every eye turned to her. That's the whole point, isn't it? Make Caspian look weak, make people question his leadership, then swoop in offering stability and strength. Classic coup strategy. The rogue was staring at her with wide eyes. You're the healer, the one they're talking about. Clara frowned. What do you mean? The scarred man, Cain, he knows about you. Says you're a complication they didn't plan for. Says they need to... He trailed off, looking terrified. Says they need to what? Caspian's voice was deadly quiet. Eliminate her, the rogue whispered, before she becomes too valuable to the kingdom. The temperature in the cell seemed to drop 20 degrees. Caspian's power filled the space, pressing down on them all like physical weight. The guards dropped to their knees, unable to withstand the pressure. Even Frost and Vex bowed their heads, their wolves whimpering submission. If anyone, and I mean anyone, lays a hand on her, Caspian said, each word measured and final, I will hunt them to the ends of the earth and make their death's last days. Do you understand me? The rogue nodded frantically. I'm just telling you what he said. I didn't agree to it, I swear. Caspian turned to Frost. Double the guard on Clara. No one gets near her without my explicit permission. And I want Cain Bloodworth found. Bring him to me alive if possible, but dead works too. Yes, Your Majesty. As they left the dungeons, Clara felt the weight of what she'd learned pressing down on her. She wasn't just a healer now, wasn't just a true mate or future queen. She was a target, a complication in someone else's plans for conquest. You're not leaving my sight, Caspian said as they climbed the stairs. Not until this is resolved. Caspian, I can't just hide. You can and you will. He stopped, turning to face her. I just found you. I'm not losing you to some mercenary's blade because you're too stubborn to accept protection. Clara saw the fear beneath his anger, the same fear he'd confessed earlier, that caring about her would lead to losing her. Okay, she said softly. I'll accept protection, but I'm not going to stop healing the wounded. That's non-negotiable. Then I'll assign guards to the infirmary. Fine. They stared at each other, neither willing to back down completely, both making concessions. Finally, Caspian's lips twitched. You're infuriating. You're overbearing. And yet here we are. Here we are, Clara agreed. Over the following days, the dynamic in the palace shifted noticeably. Guards shadowed Clara everywhere, but she grew accustomed to their presence, even learned their names. Marcus, who had a dry sense of humor, Thea, a fierce warrior with 3 children, Garrett, young and eager to prove himself. They protected her during her healing sessions in the infirmary, which had become a daily routine. Word of her abilities spread beyond the palace. Families from outlying territories began arriving, bringing wounded relatives, begging for her help. Clara couldn't turn them all away, despite Caspian's concerns about her exhaustion. She learned to pace herself, to heal only the most critical cases, to let natural recovery handle the rest. And slowly, something unexpected happened. People started to see her not as the weak girl who didn't belong, but as their healer, their future queen. Women brought her flowers from their gardens. Farmers offered fresh produce. A blacksmith crafted her a beautiful hairpin, its design incorporating healing herbs. The gifts were simple, but they represented something profound: acceptance. Even the council began to change their tune. After Clara saved Magistrate Thorne's grandson from a hunting accident, the older woman's hostility thawed into grudging respect. Cornelius consulted her on supply logistics for medicine. Vex asked her opinion on defensive strategies that would minimize casualties. She was becoming part of the kingdom, not just an accessory to its king. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after the dungeon interrogation. Frost burst into the war room where Clara was studying maps with Caspian, learning the territories she would one day help govern. We found him, Frost said, breathing hard. Cain Bloodworth. He's holed up in an abandoned fortress in the border mountains. We have him surrounded. Caspian stood immediately. Assemble a strike force. I want him taken alive for questioning. There's more, Your Majesty. Frost's expression was grim. He's not alone. Looks like he's got at least 50 mercenaries with him. And... He hesitated. There are banners. Eastern Territory colors. They're not even hiding it anymore, Clara said. This is a declaration. Caspian's hands clenched into fists. Then we'll give them an answer they won't forget. Frost, I want 200 warriors ready to march within the hour. Full combat gear, siege equipment if necessary. We're ending this today. After Frost left, Caspian turned to Clara. You'll stay here, behind the palace walls. No, Clara interrupted. If you're riding into battle, I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Caspian, listen to me. She moved to stand before him, meeting his glare without flinching. You're about to fight 50 mercenaries who want you dead. People will be wounded, possibly killed. You need a healer with the army, and I'm the best you've got. You're also the primary target. Bringing you to the battlefield is suicide. So is leaving your warriors to die when I could save them. Clara grabbed his hand, squeezing hard. I know you're afraid of losing me, but you can't protect me by locking me away. That's not living, remember? That's just existing. She threw his own words back at him and saw the moment they landed. Caspian's expression crumbled, frustration and fear and reluctant acceptance warring across his face. If anything happens to you, it won't. I'll have guards, I'll stay back from the fighting, and I'll have you. Clara rose on her toes, kissing him softly. Trust me. Trust us. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I'm going to regret this. Probably, Clara said, making him laugh despite everything. The ride to the border mountains took most of the day. Clara sat astride a gentle mare flanked by Marcus and Thea, with Caspian riding ahead at the column's head. 200 warriors followed, grim-faced and ready for blood. The abandoned fortress came into view as the sun began its descent, a crumbling structure of stone and timber built generations ago and long since forgotten. Except now it bristled with armed men, their weapons glinting in the fading light. Caspian called a halt, surveying the fortress with tactical precision. They have the high ground and defensible position. A direct assault would be costly. So we don't assault, Clara said, an idea forming. We negotiate. Every head turned to stare at her. Caspian frowned. Negotiate? Cain Bloodworth is a mercenary. He fights for money, not loyalty. Clara dismounted, her legs wobbly from the long ride. What if we offer him more gold than the Eastern Territory paid? Convince him to turn over whoever's giving him orders? Vex, who had accompanied them, shook his head. Mercenaries have codes. Betraying an employer would destroy his reputation. Unless the employer betrayed him first, Clara countered. Think about it. Cain's here with 50 men, flying Eastern colors openly. That makes him the obvious target, the one who'll take the fall if this goes wrong. Meanwhile, whoever hired him stays safe in the Eastern Territory, hands clean. She saw the pieces clicking together in their minds. Caspian's eyes sharpened. He's expendable, a convenient scapegoat. Exactly. So we make him see that. Give him a way out that doesn't end with him dead or disgraced. Clara looked at the fortress. Let me talk to him. Absolutely not, Caspian said immediately. He won't hurt me. I'm worth more alive. You said so yourself. And a woman approaching unarmed for negotiation won't trigger the same defenses as armed warriors. Clara could see Caspian preparing to argue and cut him off. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can either support me or try to stop me, but we both know the bond won't let you actually hurt me to keep me here. It was a calculated risk, using the mate bond as leverage. Caspian's jaw clenched so hard she thought she heard teeth crack. You're manipulating me. I'm making a strategic decision, Clara corrected. Same as you do every day. You're just not used to someone else making them. For a long, tense moment, they stared at each other. Then Caspian exhaled sharply. Fine, but I'm coming with you. And if anything goes wrong, you run. Understand? Understood. They approached the fortress together, hands raised to show they were unarmed. Mercenaries lined the walls, arrows trained on them, but no one fired. The gates creaked open, and a tall figure emerged, scarred face, missing fingers, exactly as the rogue had described. Cain Bloodworth regarded them with cold calculation. The Lycan King himself. I'm honored. I doubt that, Caspian said. Let's skip the pleasantries. You're working for the Eastern Territory, organizing attacks to destabilize my rule. Am I? Cain's smile didn't reach his eyes. Prove it. I don't need to prove it. I need to offer you a better deal, Caspian gestured to Clara. This is my mate, Clara. She's a true healer, worth more than whatever gold the Eastern Alpha promised you. Cain's eyes flickered to Clara, assessing. So I've heard. Quite the prize, which is why my orders are to kill her. Clara felt Caspian tense beside her, but forced herself to remain calm. Except killing me doesn't benefit you. It benefits whoever hired you. They get a destabilized kingdom, you get hunted by every warrior in 3 territories, and meanwhile they're safe at home, pretending innocence. Go on, Cain said, his interest clearly piqued. You're the fall guy, Clara continued. The obvious culprit. When this is over, whether you succeed or fail, the Eastern Alpha will disavow you. Claim you went rogue, acted alone, were a renegade he had no control over. You'll be hunted, your reputation destroyed, all while he reaps the benefits. Cain's expression didn't change, but Clara saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. And you're offering what? Mercy? Better. Employment. Caspian stepped forward. Work for me. Double whatever the Eastern Territory paid. All I want in exchange is information. Who hired you? What their plans are? What other assets they have in place? You want me to betray a client? I want you to survive, Caspian corrected. Because right now you have 200 warriors surrounding this fortress, siege equipment on the way, and a very angry king who's considering just burning the whole thing down with you inside. Or you can take the gold, give me the information, and walk away with your reputation intact. The mercenary who got a better offer and took it. No one can fault you for that, Cain considered, his gaze shifting between Caspian and Clara. You're serious? Completely. But the offer expires in 5 minutes. After that, we go to war, and I guarantee you won't like how it ends. The silence stretched. Clara held her breath, every muscle tense. This had to work. If Cain refused, people would die, maybe including her and Caspian. Finally, Cain laughed, a harsh bark of sound. You've got guts, I'll give you that. Both of you. He turned, barking orders to his men. Stand down. We're accepting the king's offer. Protests erupted from the mercenaries, but Cain silenced them with a glare. Would you rather fight 200 warriors for an employer who's planning to throw us to the wolves anyway? Take the gold and live to fight another day. Over the next hour, the negotiations were hammered out. Cain provided names, locations, detailed plans for a coordinated invasion, set to begin within the month. The Eastern Alpha had been gathering forces for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. Clara's appearance had accelerated his timeline. A weak queen was an opportunity to exploit. Except Clara wasn't weak, and now Caspian had everything he needed to counter the threat. As they rode back to the palace, Clara felt something shift inside her. She'd faced down a mercenary, negotiated a peaceful resolution, and gained critical intelligence, all things she never could have imagined doing when she first arrived at the Shadow Palace. Caspian rode beside her, his hand occasionally brushing against hers. That was reckless, he said quietly. That was effective, Clara countered. It was both. He looked at her, and the pride in his eyes made her chest warm. You're going to make a terrifying queen. Is that a compliment? It's the truth. He caught her hand, lacing their fingers together. You're not the girl who walked into my throne room 3 weeks ago. You've become something else, something stronger. Clara squeezed his hand. I had a good teacher. I didn't teach you courage. You had that all along. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I just finally noticed it. When they reached the palace, news of their success had already spread. The council waited in the throne room, their expressions a mixture of relief and grudging respect. Magistrate Thorne actually smiled when Clara entered. Well done, Thorne said simply. Both of you. The praise felt like victory. That night, alone in Caspian's chambers, her chambers now, unofficially, Clara stood at the window watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. She felt Caspian's arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. No regrets? He murmured. About which part? Any of it. The bond, the crown, the danger. Clara turned in his arms, meeting his silver eyes. Not a single one. He kissed her then, soft and thorough, the bond between them singing with completion. When they finally broke apart, Caspian rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered, the words sounding like they'd been torn from somewhere deep inside him. I didn't want to. I fought against it. But I love you anyway. Clara's eyes burned with tears. I love you too. Even though I'm broken? You're not broken. You're healing. She cupped his face. We both are. Outside, the kingdom slept, unaware that its future queen had just won her first real victory, not against enemies or politics, but against doubt itself. And in the morning, they would face whatever came next. The word echoed in Clara's mind as dawn broke over the Shadow Palace, painting the black stone walls in shades of gold and amber. She woke wrapped in Caspian's arms, his breath warm against her neck, his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. For the first time since arriving at this fortress of ice and iron, she felt like she belonged. But belonging came with a price. The intelligence Kane had provided painted a grim picture. The Eastern Alpha, a wolf named Silas Darkwater, had been planning his invasion for 3 years. He'd positioned loyalists throughout the Northern Territory, bribed officials, and amassed an army of over 800 warriors. The rogue attacks were just the opening move in a carefully orchestrated campaign to weaken Caspian's hold on power before the hammer fell. And the hammer was set to fall in less than 2 weeks. Caspian stirred beside her, his silver eyes opening to meet hers. You're awake early. Couldn't sleep. Too much thinking. Clara traced the line of his jaw, feeling the rough stubble beneath her fingers. We have 2 weeks to prepare for a war. 13 days, Caspian corrected, his strategic mind already working. Assuming Kane's intelligence is accurate. You don't trust him? I trust that he wants to survive. That makes his information reliable enough. Caspian sat up, the sheet pooling around his waist, revealing the map of scars across his chest and back, evidence of a lifetime spent fighting. But we can't assume Silas doesn't have other assets we don't know about. Kane was just one piece on the board. Clara sat up beside him, pulling the sheet around her shoulders against the morning chill. So what do? We play the game better than he does. Caspian's expression hardened into the mask of the Lycan King, the vulnerable man from last night disappearing behind layers of steel. Get dressed. We have a council to summon. Within the hour, the war room was packed. The full council sat around the table, along with Commander Frost, the heads of the warrior divisions, and several pack leaders from the outlying territories who'd arrived overnight after receiving urgent summons. The atmosphere crackled with tension and barely contained aggression, wolves preparing for battle. Caspian stood at the head of the table, maps spread before him, his presence commanding absolute attention. 13 days from now, Silas Darkwater will march on our borders with 800 warriors. His goal is to take the Northern Territory, claim my crown, and install himself as the new Lycan King. Shocked murmurs rippled through the room. One of the pack leaders, a grizzled man named Henrik, slammed his fist on the table. Let him try. We'll tear his army apart. We could, Caspian agreed, but it would be costly. Hundreds dead on both sides, territories devastated, families destroyed. I'd rather avoid that if possible. What's the alternative? Magistrate Thorne asked, her sharp eyes studying the maps. Surrender? Victory without battle, Clara said, drawing every eye to her. She felt the weight of their attention but forced herself to continue. Silas's entire strategy relies on the perception that Caspian is weak, that his choice of me as mate has compromised his judgment. What if we prove that perception wrong? What if we show the territories that this kingdom is stronger than ever? Cornelius frowned. How do we prove that in 13 days? The bond ceremony, Caspian said, his gaze locked on Clara. Understanding passed between them, the same strategic mind working in tandem. We formalize Clara's position as queen, publicly, with representatives from all 3 territories invited to witness. We show strength, unity, and confidence. That's just pageantry, Henrik scoffed. Silas won't be impressed by a fancy ceremony. No, but his allies might, Clara countered. Kane said Silas has been building support by spreading rumors that the Northern Territory is in chaos, that Caspian is distracted and vulnerable. A bond ceremony, especially one showcasing a true mate bond and a healer queen, undermines that narrative. It shows stability and strength. Vex leaned forward, his scarred throat working as he considered. It could work. If we invite observers from neutral territories, word will spread. Silas's support base might fracture if his propaganda proves false. And if it doesn't? Thorne asked pragmatically. Then we fight, Caspian said simply. But we fight with the moral high ground, with allies who've seen our strength firsthand, and with a unified kingdom behind us. He looked around the table. I'm not asking for opinions. I'm telling you what we're going to do. The bond ceremony will take place in 10 days. That gives us 3 days before Silas's planned invasion. The council erupted in discussion, but Clara barely heard it. 10 days. In 10 days, she would officially become queen of a territory she'd barely begun to understand, bound forever to a man she was still learning to love in the midst of a brewing war. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. After the meeting dispersed, Caspian pulled her aside. Are you certain about this? The bond ceremony isn't just symbolic, it's permanent, binding in ways that go beyond the mate bond. Once it's done, you can't walk away. Clara met his gaze steadily. I've never wanted to walk away. You say that now, but you've seen what I am, what this life requires. Violence, hard decisions, loneliness, even in a crowd. His jaw tightened. I'm giving you one last chance to reconsider. No. Clara took his hands, lacing their fingers together. I'm not reconsidering, and I'm not walking away. We're in this together, remember? For better or worse. Something in Caspian's expression cracked, vulnerability bleeding through his carefully maintained control. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Clara agreed, making him smile despite everything. But you're stuck with me anyway. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, the bond between them flaring with heat and certainty. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Caspian rested his forehead against hers. 10 days. Then you're mine forever. I'm already yours, Clara whispered. The ceremony just makes it official. The following days passed in a blur of preparation. The palace transformed from a fortress of shadows into something approaching celebration. Servants hung banners in deep green and silver, the colors Clara had unconsciously chosen, now adopted as her own. The throne room was polished until the black marble gleamed. The kitchens worked around the clock, preparing for the feast that would follow the ceremony. And Clara was thrust into a crash course on being queen. Magistrate Thorne appointed herself Clara's primary instructor, drilling her mercilessly on protocol, etiquette, and the intricate web of politics that governed the territories. You'll be presented to over 200 guests, Thorne said, her tone suggesting this was a test Clara was expected to fail. Alphas, pack leaders, nobles from all 3 territories, each one will be watching for weakness, for any sign that you're unfit to rule. No pressure then, Clara muttered, trying to memorize the names and pack affiliations Thorne had made her study. Pressure is what forges steel, Thorne replied. You wanted to be queen. Now prove you can handle it. But alongside the harsh lessons, something unexpected happened. Women from the palace and surrounding territories began arriving, offering help. Meredith from the infirmary brought a dress her grandmother had worn at her own bond ceremony, deep emerald silk with silver embroidery altered to fit Clara's smaller frame. The blacksmith's wife taught her how to braid her hair in the traditional style of northern queens. Even Vivian Ashcroft appeared, bringing a necklace of moonstone and silver. I was wrong about you, Vivian said stiffly, clearly uncomfortable with the admission. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. And she hesitated. The kingdom needs strength right now. We need you to succeed. Clara accepted the necklace with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the gesture. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't screw this up. But Vivian smiled as she said it, some of the old hostility fading. Clara spent her evenings with Caspian, learning the territories she would help govern. He showed her the maps, explained the alliances and rivalries, shared the history that had shaped this kingdom. But they also talked about smaller things, favorite foods, childhood memories, the dreams they'd abandoned and the ones they still held. I wanted to be a scholar once, Caspian admitted one night, his fingers trailing through Clara's hair as she lay against his chest. Study history and philosophy, teach at the academy. My father laughed when I told him, said kings don't have the luxury of intellectual pursuits. You could still do it, Clara said, after the war, after things stabilize. There's no rule that says a king can't be a scholar too. Maybe. He pressed a kiss to her temple. What about you? What did you want before all this? Clara considered. To matter. To be more than just the healer's overlooked daughter with the weak wolf. I wanted people to see me. She looked up at him. Careful what you wish for, right? Are you happy? The question was quiet, almost vulnerable. Truly. Yes, Clara said without hesitation. Terrified, overwhelmed, completely out of my depth, but happy. She cupped his face. Because of you. On the 8th day, scouts reported movement on the eastern border. Silas's army was mobilizing early, likely having learned about the bond ceremony and recognizing it as the threat it was to his plans. He's going to try to disrupt it, Commander Frost said during an emergency council meeting. Strike before the ceremony, catch us unprepared. Let him try, Caspian said coldly. Double the perimeter guards. I want eyes on every approach to the palace. If Silas sends even a single scout within 10 miles of our walls, I want to know about it. What about the ceremony? Cornelius asked. Do we postpone? No. Caspian's tone brooked no argument. We proceed as planned. Silas wants us afraid, wants us to show weakness by canceling or delaying. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to invite him. Shocked silence crashed over the room. Clara stared at Caspian, trying to understand his strategy. Your Majesty, Thorne said carefully, inviting our enemy to the bond ceremony seems strategic, Caspian interrupted. Think about it. Silas has been operating in shadows, spreading lies and building support through propaganda. What happens if we drag him into the light, force him to either attend and witness our strength or refuse and look like a coward to the neutral territories? Clara caught on. It puts him in an impossible position. If he comes, he has to watch us succeed and can't attack without looking like he's violated sacred ceremony rites. If he doesn't come, he loses credibility with the same allies he's been courting. Exactly. Caspian's smile was sharp as a blade. Either way, we win. Vex shook his head admiringly. That's either brilliant or suicidal. Possibly both. Probably both, Caspian agreed. Vex, draft the invitation. Make it formal, respectful, impossible to refuse without serious insult. Have it delivered to Silas by tomorrow morning. As the council dispersed to implement the plan, Clara felt a mixture of awe and terror at Caspian's audacity. He was gambling everything on this ceremony, betting that showing strength would be enough to prevent war, and if he was wrong, people would die. That night, unable to sleep, Clara made her way to the infirmary. Several patients still recovered from the earlier rogue attacks, and she spent hours moving between cots, offering what healing she could. The work grounded her, reminded her of who she was beneath the titles and political maneuvering. She was finishing with a young warrior whose broken leg was finally mending when she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she found an elderly woman standing in the doorway, small and wizened, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through to Clara's soul. You have your grandmother's gift, the woman said without preamble. Clara blinked. I never knew my grandmother. No, you wouldn't have. Iris died before you were born. The woman moved closer, her steps surprisingly steady despite her age. I was her teacher, back when the world was different. My name is Elder Moira. The name sparked recognition. Iris was the healer Caspian had mentioned, the one who'd burned herself out saving her pack during a plague. You're saying my grandmother was Iris? The true healer? The last one before you, Moira confirmed. The gift runs in bloodlines but skips generations. Your mother didn't have it, but you do. She studied Clara with those penetrating eyes. And you're making the same mistakes she did. Clara's stomach dropped. What do you mean? You're giving too much, too fast, healing everyone who asks without regard for the cost to yourself. Moira's voice was stern but not unkind. Iris did the same. Couldn't stand to see suffering, so she poured everything she had into stopping it, until there was nothing left to pour. But people need help. And you can help them better by surviving, Moira interrupted. A healer who burns out after a year helps no one. A healer who learns balance, who paces herself and sets boundaries, can serve for decades. She placed a gnarled hand on Clara's arm. Your grandmother saved hundreds before she died at 28. Imagine how many more she could have saved if she'd lived to 50. The words hit like physical blows. Clara sank onto a nearby bench, her legs suddenly weak. How do I find balance? How do I say no when people are dying? By remembering that you're not responsible for saving everyone. You're responsible for doing what you can within your limits and trusting others to carry the rest. Moira sat beside her. You have a kingdom to help govern, a mate to support, a life to live. Healing is part of that, but it's not all of it. Don't make it your whole identity. Clara thought about that, about the exhaustion that had become her constant companion, the way she pushed herself past safe limits because refusing felt like failure. I don't know if I can. Then learn, Moira said simply. Because if you don't, you'll end up like Iris, dead before your time, leaving your mate alone in your kingdom without the gift that makes you valuable. She stood, patting Clara's shoulder. I've said my piece. What you do with it is up to you. After Moira left, Clara sat in the quiet infirmary, processing the warning. She'd been so focused on proving her worth, on being useful enough to deserve her position, that she'd forgotten the most basic truth. She couldn't help anyone if she destroyed herself in the process. It was a lesson that echoed Caspian's earlier words, and suddenly Clara understood the parallel. They were both running from the same fear, that they weren't enough, that they had to give everything to be worthy of love and respect. But neither of them was alone anymore. The morning of the bond ceremony dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Clara woke alone. Caspian had been moved to separate quarters the night before, as tradition demanded they not see each other until the ceremony. Servants descended on Clara's chamber before she'd fully dressed, bearing the emerald gown and trays of cosmetics. Meredith supervised the preparations with military precision, ensuring every detail was perfect. The dress fit like it had been made for Clara, the silk cool against her skin, the silver embroidery catching the light with every movement. You look like a queen, Meredith said softly, securing the moonstone necklace around Clara's throat. Clara studied herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the overlooked healer's daughter in homespun clothes. In her place stood someone who looked like she belonged in a palace, like she could command respect and attention. But inside she was still Clara, still terrified, still uncertain, still learning. It's time, Magistrate Thorne announced from the doorway. For once, there was no criticism in her expression, just something that might have been approval. The guests are assembled. Clara followed Thorne through the palace corridors, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The throne room doors loomed ahead, and beyond them she could hear the murmur of hundreds of voices. The doors opened. The throne room had been transformed. Candles lined every surface, their combined light banishing the usual shadows. Flowers, rare and expensive this time of year, decorated the space in cascades of white and silver. And packed into every available space stood wolves from across 3 territories, all dressed in their finest, all turning to watch as Clara entered. At the far end, before the obsidian throne, stood Caspian. He wore formal robes of black and silver, his dark hair pulled back, his silver eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Clara's breath catch. The bond between them sang, pulling her forward like a tide she couldn't resist. The walk to the throne felt eternal and instantaneous. Clara was aware of every eye tracking her movement, every whisper that followed in her wake, but her focus remained locked on Caspian. When she finally reached him, he extended his hand and she took it without hesitation. You're beautiful, he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. You're biased, Clara whispered back, making him smile. Elder Moira stood before them, apparently serving as the ceremony officiant, another surprise. We gather to witness the bond ceremony of Caspian Shadow, Lycan King of the Northern Territory, and Clara Ashford, his chosen mate and true healer, Moira announced, her voice carrying through the vast space. Let any who would object speak now or hold their peace. Silence greeted the traditional challenge. Clara exhaled in relief. The bond between true mates is sacred, Moira continued. It transcends choice, defies logic, and endures beyond death itself. It is a gift and a burden, a strength and a vulnerability. Do you both accept this bond freely and without reservation? I do, Caspian said, his voice steady. I do, Clara echoed. Moira produced a silver knife, its blade gleaming in the candlelight. Then seal your bond in blood and witness that all may know you are one. Caspian took the knife first, drawing the blade across his palm without flinching. Blood welled dark against his pale skin. He handed the knife to Clara, who copied the gesture, her hand stinging as the blade bit deep. They pressed their palms together, blood mingling, and the bond between them exploded. Clara gasped as power flooded through her. Not her own, but Caspian's, his wolf sharing strength with hers in a way she'd never experienced. Her small, timid wolf suddenly felt different, still gentle, still healing-focused, but backed by the raw power of a Lycan King. And flowing the other direction, she felt Caspian experiencing her gift, that warmth that made her a true healer, now accessible to him as well. They were still separate beings, still individual, but they were also connected in a way that went beyond words, beyond explanation. Two souls recognizing each other as home. "I present to you," Moira announced, her voice ringing with satisfaction, "Caspian Shadow and Clara Shadow, King and Queen of the Northern Territory. Bound by blood, sealed by witness, united until death and beyond." The throne room erupted in applause and howls, wolves celebrating in both forms. Clara and Caspian turned to face their kingdom, hands still clasped, blood still mingling. And there, in the back of the crowd, Clara spotted a figure who didn't applaud. A tall man with hard eyes and an expression of barely contained fury. Silas Darkwater had accepted the invitation after all. The feast that followed was a blur of toasts and congratulations, pack leaders approaching to offer allegiance and support. Clara smiled until her face hurt, accepted well wishes from people whose names she'd barely learned, and tried to ignore the weight of Silas's stare from across the hall. Caspian noticed her tension. "Ignore him," he murmured against her ear. "He came to intimidate us. Don't give him the satisfaction. He looks like he wants to start a war right here in the throne room. He can't. Sacred ceremony rules. Violence during a bond celebration is forbidden under ancient law. Breaking it would turn every pack in 3 territories against him." Caspian's smile was sharp. "Which is exactly why we invited him. He's trapped." Clara watched Silas circulate through the crowd, speaking with other alphas, trying to maintain his political alliances even as the ceremony he'd hoped to prevent succeeded spectacularly. Several wolves who'd been wavering in their support visibly pulled back from him, unwilling to associate with someone on the losing side. "It's working," Clara said softly. "The neutral territories are distancing themselves from him. Because we showed strength, exactly as planned." Caspian's hand tightened on hers. "But this isn't over. Silas won't give up just because one strategy failed." The words proved prophetic. 3 hours into the feast, a guard burst through the doors, his face pale. "Your Majesty, the eastern border. Silas's army is attacking the outposts." The hall fell silent. Silas stood, his expression one of false surprise. "How terrible. And during a celebration, no less. Your Majesty, I'm shocked that my territory's forces would act so dishonorably." The lie was transparent. Everyone in the room knew Silas had ordered the attack, but proving it was another matter. Caspian stood slowly, his power filling the room like pressure before a storm. "Are you claiming you have no control over your own army, Alpha Darkwater?" "I'm claiming they must have acted without my knowledge," Silas replied smoothly. "Perhaps in response to provocations from your border patrols?" "There were no provocations." Caspian's voice could have frozen fire. "This is an act of war, carried out under cover of ceremony to maximize damage and minimize my response options." "Strong accusations," Silas said. "Do you have proof?" This was the trap. Silas had timed his attack perfectly. Caspian couldn't respond militarily without violating the sacred ceremony laws himself. He was forced to either accept the attack or break ancient tradition. Clara felt Caspian's rage through their new bond, felt his wolf clawing for release, for vengeance, and she felt something else. His fear that responding wrong would cost everything they'd worked for. She stepped forward. "You want proof, Alpha Darkwater? Let's find it together." Every eye turned to her. Silas's expression flickered with uncertainty. "What do you propose, Your Majesty?" The title felt strange on his lips, mocking. Clara ignored it. "A truth circle. Ancient tradition, older even than ceremony law. We gather witnesses from neutral territories, ask questions under the binding, and see whose story holds." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Truth circles were rarely used anymore. They required powerful magic users to enforce the binding, and lying within one caused physical pain, sometimes death. But they were also considered absolutely sacred, their results unquestionable. Silas's jaw tightened. That's a rather extreme measure. You said you wanted proof, Clara interrupted. Here's your chance to prove your innocence, unless you're afraid of what the truth might reveal. The challenge hung in the air. Silas couldn't refuse without looking guilty, but accepting meant risking exposure. Clara watched him calculate, saw the moment he decided he could bluff his way through. Very well, Silas said coldly. Let's have your truth circle. Elder Moira stepped forward. I can perform the binding, but I'll need 3 other powerful wolves to anchor it. Magistrate Thorne volunteered immediately, along with 2 visiting pack leaders from neutral territories. They formed a circle in the center of the hall, power crackling between them as they wove the binding, a shimmer in the air, almost invisible, but thrumming with energy that made Clara's skin prickle. Step forward, Alpha Darkwater, Moira commanded. Silas entered the circle, his expression confident. The binding surrounded him, settled over his shoulders like a weight. Did you order the attacks on the eastern border outpost tonight? Moira asked. No, Silas said clearly. The binding flared, burning bright enough to make the watching crowd gasp. Silas cried out, dropping to one knee as pain lanced through him, the physical cost of lying within a truth circle. Did you orchestrate the rogue attacks over the past months to destabilize King Caspian's rule? Moira continued relentlessly. Silas tried to say no, but the word wouldn't come. His face contorted with effort and pain. Yes, he finally gasped, the binding forcing truth from his lips. Yes, I hired Cain Bloodworth to organize rogues and attack the territories. Shock rippled through the hall. Even those who'd suspected Silas had no proof until now. Did you plan to use the bond ceremony as cover for a military invasion? Yes. Silas's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried in the absolute silence. Did you intend to assassinate Queen Clara to prevent her healing abilities from strengthening the Northern Territory? Yes. Each confession seemed to tear from him, the binding allowing no deception. Yes, I ordered her death. I ordered all of it. The binding released him, and Silas collapsed to the floor, breathing hard. The assembled wolves stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. His carefully built alliances crumbled in real time as pack leaders he'd courted turned away, unwilling to associate with someone exposed as dishonorable. Caspian descended from the dais, stopping before Silas. You attacked my territory. You tried to murder my mate. Under ancient law, I could execute you right here, right now. Silas looked up, defeat and hatred warring in his eyes. Then do it. No, Clara said, moving to stand beside Caspian. Execution makes you a martyr, someone for your supporters to rally around, she addressed the crowd. Instead, I propose exile. Silas Darkwater is stripped of his title, his lands, and his pack affiliations. He's banished from all 3 territories, forbidden from returning under penalty of death. The crowd erupted in approval, howls and shouts of agreement. Exile was worse than death for a wolf, cutting them off from pack and territory, leaving them truly alone. It was a fitting punishment. The council will vote, Magistrate Thorne announced. All in favor of exile? Every hand raised. Even Silas's own pack members, humiliated by his exposure, voted against him. Silas Darkwater, Caspian said formally, you are hereby banished. You have until dawn to leave our territories. If you're found within our borders after sunrise, you will be killed on sight. Guards hauled Silas to his feet and dragged him from the hall. The former Alpha didn't struggle, didn't protest. He'd gambled everything and lost. As the doors closed behind him, the hall remained silent for a long moment. Then someone started applauding. Commander Frost, his expression one of fierce pride. Others joined in, until the entire throne room thundered with approval. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. They'd done it. They'd exposed the conspiracy, prevented a war, and solidified the kingdom's unity, all without spilling a drop of blood. Caspian pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. You were brilliant, he murmured. The truth circle was genius. I learned from the best, Clara replied. The celebration resumed, but with a different energy now. Relief mixed with triumph, the knowledge that they'd faced a serious threat and emerged victorious. Pack leaders who'd been wavering in their support now approached with genuine pledges of allegiance. The neutral territories recognized strength when they saw it. As the night wore on, Clara found herself in conversation with wolves from across the territories, discussing not battle strategies or political maneuvering, but healing techniques, agricultural improvements, trade opportunities. The questions she'd been asking herself, how to be more than just a healer, how to be a queen, suddenly had answers. She could be both. She could heal when needed, but also govern, strategize, lead. There was no single path to being queen, no template she had to fit. She just had to be herself, but amplified by the strength of her bond with Caspian. Near midnight, Caspian pulled her away from the crowd, leading her to a balcony that overlooked the territories spread below. Lights twinkled in the distance, villages and farms, all part of the kingdom they now protected together. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "That a month ago, I was alone," Caspian said quietly. "Ruling through fear, keeping everyone at arm's length, convinced that was the only way to survive." He turned to face her. "And then you appeared and destroyed every defense I'd built." "Is that a complaint?" "No." He pulled her close, wrapping his coat around them both. "It's gratitude. You saved me, Clara. Not just my kingdom, but me. You reminded me that strength isn't just about power and control. It's about connection, trust, and the courage to be vulnerable." Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "We saved each other," she corrected. "You taught me I was stronger than I thought, that being overlooked didn't mean being worthless." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, watching their kingdom sleep peacefully below. The war they'd feared had been averted, the threats had been neutralized, and for the first time the future looked not terrifying but full of possibility. "What happens now?" Clara asked. Caspian smiled against her hair. "Now we rebuild, strengthen the territories, heal the wounds from the rogue attacks, forge new alliances, and we do it together." "Together," Clara repeated, the word feeling like a promise. In the months that followed, that promise became reality. Clara established healing centers throughout the territories, training other healers in the techniques Elder Moira taught her. She learned to set boundaries, to pace herself, to trust that she didn't have to save everyone personally. The work was still exhausting, still challenging, but sustainable. She also took an active role in governance, sitting in on council meetings, mediating disputes between pacts, helping Caspian navigate the complex web of territorial politics. Magistrate Thorne became not just an instructor but an advisor, and eventually something approaching a friend. The council members who'd initially dismissed Clara as worthless now sought her input on everything from military strategy to agricultural policy. And Caspian, closed off, frozen Caspian, slowly thawed. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, allowed himself to be vulnerable in ways that would have been unthinkable before. He still had nightmares sometimes, still struggled with the fear of loss. But Clara was there to remind him that fear was part of loving, not a reason to avoid it. They were not perfect. They argued, disagreed, frustrated each other regularly. But they also supported each other, learned from each other, grew together in ways neither had imagined possible. A year after the bond ceremony, Clara stood in the same throne room where she'd first met Caspian, but everything was different. The black marble gleamed not with cold perfection, but with warm candlelight. The severe banners had been joined by softer decorations. And the wolves assembled weren't subjects held by fear, but people united by genuine respect and affection for their rulers. Commander Frost approached, bowing slightly. "Your Majesty, the representatives from the Southern Territory have arrived. They're requesting an audience about the trade agreement." Clara nodded. "I'll meet with them after lunch." "Is His Majesty still in the war room?" "Yes, reviewing the defensive positions with the new recruits." Frost smiled, something he did more often these days. "He said to tell you he'll be late for dinner. Again." "Of course he did." Clara sighed with mock exasperation. "Tell him if he misses another meal, I'm eating his dessert." Frost laughed, bowing as he departed to deliver the message. Clara made her way through the palace, greeting servants by name, pausing to heal a guard's sprained wrist, stopping in the infirmary to check on patients. These small moments, the daily work of being queen, had become her life, and she loved it. She found Caspian exactly where Frost said he'd be, standing before a map with a group of young warriors, explaining defensive strategies with the patience of a born teacher. When he looked up and saw her, his entire face transformed with a smile that still made her heart race. "Your Majesty," he greeted formally, though his eyes sparkled with warmth. "Your Majesty," Clara replied in the same tone. "I've been told you're planning to miss another dinner." "Duty calls," Caspian said, but he was already moving toward her, drawn by the same magnetic pull that had connected them from the beginning. "Duty can wait 20 minutes for you to eat," Clara countered. The young warriors watched with poorly concealed grins as their fearsome king yielded to his mate without argument. 20 minutes, Caspian agreed. "Then I'm back to work." As they walked toward the dining hall, hands clasped, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd arrived at the Shadow Palace as nothing, an overlooked girl with a weak wolf, summoned to fill a quota she had no chance of meeting. She'd been mocked, dismissed, told repeatedly that she didn't belong. But she'd proven them wrong. Not through power or dominance, but through courage, compassion, and the willingness to see possibilities where others saw only limitations. She'd healed a kingdom, stopped a war, and helped a broken king learn to love again. And in the process, she'd discovered her own strength, not despite her gentle wolf, but because of it. Being a healer didn't make her weak, it made her essential. Being kind didn't make her soft, it made her revolutionary. She'd become exactly what the kingdom needed. A queen who led not through fear, but through hope, who valued lives over victories, who understood that true strength meant knowing when to fight and when to heal. Caspian squeezed her hand, pulling her from her thoughts. "What are you thinking about?" "How far we've come," Clara said. "How different everything is from that first day." "Better different?" he asked, though the answer was obvious in the warmth of his eyes. "So much better." Clara rose on her toes to kiss him, there in the corridor where any servant might see, completely uncaring. The best. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. She didn't need to be stronger, more powerful, or more impressive to deserve love and respect. She just needed to be herself, fully, completely, without apology. And that was enough. That would always be enough. Outside, the sun was setting over the northern territory, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The shadows that had once seemed so oppressive now looked gentle, peaceful. The palace that had felt like a prison had become a home, and the girl who'd been overlooked her entire life had become a queen who would be remembered for generations. Not for conquests or battles, but for the revolutionary act of leading with compassion in a world built on strength. In the end, Clara Ashford had changed everything simply by refusing to change herself. And that made all the difference.